Well, hello there to all the good people of Ohio and beyond. This is Aaron Knapp, and you're tuned into Unplugged, broadcasting without permission. This is a place where the truth gets louder and we dig deeper, and where we always remember be lawful, not awful. If you want the full stories, the documents, the videos, and everything they don't want you to see, head on over to Aaron Knapp Unplugged.com, my new home for every investigation, every episode, and every update. And while you're here, be sure to like the video, follow the page, and hit subscribe, and share this with someone who needs the truth. We're building something real here. We're building something fearless, and we're doing it together. Welcome to Unplugged. Let's kick this thing off. Well, hello.
Plug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask.
Oof. Sorry about that. I usually have the mic set up already, but I've been on a little hiatus, kind of been sick. Good to see you guys all there. Hope you all had a Merry Christmas. Hope everybody got all the presents that they wanted to get. As I've stated, I've been a bit ill lately. I caught whatever flu that was that my daughter brought home, that all the kids had. And as you can tell, I'm still a little bit under the weather, but as they say, the show must go on, and I'm far past the resting stage anymore. So I wanted to slip a podcast or two in here before the end of the year. It's been an eventful year, and I just wanted to throw a few things out there. And I know for those that have followed my story, the McCann / Knapp saga should be fresh in your memory. You should know what happened. You should know how it went down. You should know it. But I always get the same thing. People are always like, hey, like, what really happened? Hey, why are you so mad? Hey, what's the problem? So what we're going to do tonight here is we're going to kind of go over a little bit of that. And then we're going to finish up with we're going to have some middle section ground on some different topics that have happened along the way. Kind of almost like a little bit of a mini year-end recap. And then we're going to get into, finally, the very end, we're going to do a little recap on my most recent story that I posted about how basically all of my research has led me to believe that all the law firms are running Lorraine at this point. But anyway, I digress. Let's get into this. So, and we're going to look into what was taken, how it was taken, and why this episode actually exists. And before we talk about the emails, the complaints, I don't even need these, or the police narratives, I make the print big now. I need to be very clear about what this actually cost me, folks, because this is not just a story about me being disliked by people in power or by others. This is a story about career being dismantled in slow motion, not through any sort of legal findings or through discipline, not through like a court, but through insinuation, back channels, weaponized concern. And what was taken from me wasn't just a job. Jobs come and go. What was taken from me was a professional identity that I spent years crafting. My credibility as a licensed social worker, my standing as a court-involved professional, my ability to work in all these systems, my CDCA, that suddenly decided I was a liability, not because I did something wrong, but because powerful people, kind of like retired police chief James McCann, said I was difficult. And the way that that was done matters. That's why all this matters. Because nobody ever sat me down and said, hey, you violated this rule. Here's the evidence. Here's the consequence. Right? As you would expect. Instead, what happened was much more efficient, much more cowardly. Emails were sent. Concerns that shouldn't even have existed were raised. Complaints were filed. And suddenly, doors that had always been open to me were quietly closing. Let's start with the obvious one. Former Police Chief James McCann. He did not just investigate an incident, right? He escalated me as a person. He did that by sending emails to other people, third parties that had nothing to do with adjudicating a complaint and everything to do with shaping a narrative, right? Emails that did not say this allegation is sustained or this policy was violated. Emails that said, in essence, this guy's becoming unhinged. This guy's a problem. This guy needs to be watched. And that language does not really stay inside the police department. It moved outward. It moved out to exactly the way language always does, right? And rumors do. It found its way into conversations with the court. It found its way into conversations with employers. And more importantly, it found its way into licensing boards that control whether you get to keep doing what you're doing or not, right? Which brings us, or brings me, I guess, to the part of the story that people really kind of need to understand. McCann filed a complaint against my license to work, all right? Not because I misrepresented myself, not because I violated ethics, not because I harmed a client, not because I was not because I was effective, persistent, and unwilling to stop pointing out his misconduct was why he did it, right? The complaint itself did not result in discipline. I was cleared. I have the letters to prove it both times. That's not the point. The point is that the complaint existed to begin with. Because in professional worlds, the allegation is often the punishment. He knew that. As much as I tease him about having such a low GPA, like he's not, I wouldn't say he's an entirely unintelligent man. I mean, he did get an associate's degree. He did graduate, from the Coast Guard. I mean, going to the Coast Guard and all that. I mean, I understand that grades don't, dictate the man. It was the only thing that at the time I was just shocked that someone with that GPA did so well. But I digress because I'm not trying to do that. What I'm saying is that he knew what he was doing. And once a licensing board gets involved, even after you're cleared, that shadow is going to remain. Employers hesitate, contracts start to evaporate, risk departments panic. The funny thing about that was the call. I'll never forget it. I get a call from my board, and they're like, "Hey, so this is blah 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 blah. You can look it up in the emails of the social work board. I'm the investigator here, and we've been assigned to investigate a complaint." And so they said, "Well, so here at the social work board, you know what we do, right?" And I was like, "Well, of course I do. Yeah, I'm just can't imagine what this complaint could be about, right?" Every guy that gets busted in social work or therapy, it always seems like it evolves around a few things. Typically, one of them is always one, right? Like a female complaint. And that's the biggest fear because 9 times out of 10, those guys have done something that they probably shouldn't have done. They've allowed themselves to be non-therapeutic and they've gotten themselves in trouble. Now, I didn't think that about me. But again, I didn't know. I'm in the thought process of because I didn't even work. I worked with juveniles. I couldn't imagine where a complaint could have come from so early in my career when I'd been working under strict supervision and reporting every interaction with my supervisor. And I immediately reported this contact with this investigator. What I thought was funny was she said, "We were just kind of wondering what you did to piss this chief off so bad." And this is the thing. They said, all right, you're not supposed to tell you who or what the report is, but people slip if you listen to the way they speak. We all do. We let little hints out. And what they said was, "We want to know what you did to make a chief of police so angry." All right, bing, who made the complaint? Well, I only live in one town. There you go. So angry that he figured out social workers had a board because they don't get calls from chiefs like that. And then he figured out a way to complaint process. And then he went through this process to make this complaint against you. Now I posted my response online 1,000 times. It was amazing. It was truthful. It was factual. And again, it just shot holes in all the little things that he did to try and discredit me. And that's what they were, folks. You say what they want. That was exactly what they were. Why would a chief of police focus on some pissant social worker in his second year on the job? Why would he go through all the trouble to waste city resources, email, and time on me? And then why would his entire chain of command after that go through all that trouble to hide it? That's always the biggest question. When you look at that and you go, well, because it was personal, it was petty. And they were right. I pissed him off to the point because again, my boss pointed it out. There was one spot in this whole email that it said, what do we got here? Oh, I got a troll in the boards. I'm sorry. I don't really monitor the chat very much. So anyway, and if you're cleared, and like bottom line is once a licensing board gets involved, even if you're cleared, that shadow's going to remain. Employers are going to hesitate. Contracts will evaporate. Risk departments panic. And I was left trying, holding the bag, trying to explain at all. And nobody could tell me, really why I was being investigated at all. Later on down the line, we end up with, well after that social work investigation happened, there was another complaint against one of my other licenses, my CDCA, which I've since let go because of that. And again, not because of any misconduct of clients, but because of who I was being inconvenient to, because I wouldn't shut up, because I kept records, because I documented things, because people prefer to stay undocumented. That's where a certain individual, a certain TH whose role cannot be brushed aside to the background noise or as background noise. Emails exist between TH and McCann, and complaints exist that rely on TH's statements. Narratives exist that trace back to TH's accusations. And they were then elevated by weight of law enforcement by McCann. And this is how private hostility becomes official action, not by proving facts, but by finding the right conduit, right? When a police chief, or former one, but a police chief at the time, treats a politically aligned complaint as a credible by default and treats the subject of that complaint as unstable by default, the outcome is predetermined. You don't need evidence. You need alignment. Honestly, and that's where all my sarcasm throughout all of this, my snarkiness, has kind of earned its place. Apparently, in this town, if you file public records requests, challenge unlawful behavior, and embarrass the people with their own documentation, their own emails, their own words, the appropriate response is not to fix the problem, right? The appropriate response is question your mental health, threaten your livelihood, quietly warn everyone else that you're a situation, all while insisting this is about our safety. It's about safety, folks, safety, professionalism, or concern, right? Because nothing says ethical governance like trying to destroy someone's career without ever charging them with a crime, right? What the fuck, over? What was stolen from me wasn't just my work. It was my time, my stability, the ability to operate in systems that suddenly decided I was like radioactive toxicity. And it was stolen, not by accident, not by misunderstanding, but by a series of conscious choices, right? They were made by people with power who understood exactly how much damage an allegation can do, even when it fails. And that's why this whole episode exists, because people keep asking me the same question. In all these situations, why didn't you just walk away? Why didn't you just stop? Well, the answer is clear. Walking away does not get my career back. Walking away will not undo the complaints that he made or she made. Walking away doesn't correct a record that's already been poisoned. And walking away only teaches the system that those tactics will work again on someone else. So before we get into, how this became some sort of a sport about hating Aaron Knapp, which, hey, more power to you. Everybody's got to have somebody to hate at night. before we talk about how lawful conduct was reframed as disruption, I need to really get this point through. This is not some abstract bullshit. This is not theoretical. This is not, social work stuff, as you guys mambo jambo, whatever you call it. This is not online drama. It was a coordinated use of authority, language, and process that cost me professional footing. That's why I'm telling the story now, once again, at the end of the year, on my terms, with receipts, before the whatever lawsuit happens, before whatever else happens, before there's agreements and that people have to stop talking about things and whatnot. I'm gonna get it out there in a very factual, non-emotional way. It just kind of lays out what they did, what I did, and you decide what you want. But in the grand scheme of things, it's up to you. Um, but that's what you have to think about is why on God's green earth would a first year social worker, I mean, I guess why would I do it? Well, it's because, again, I have minimal time. I became a social worker in my late 40s. Unlike all my peers, I wasn't starting out as a child, so I moved on to big advocacy. It just so happens that something got dumped in my lap early on. And I'm not one to back away from things, especially not when every single semester they drill in your head in social work school that you're not supposed to. Like, that's the one thing you're not supposed to do. I did the one thing they told me to always do. If you're right, stand your ground. Right makes might. I don't think they were right. But anyway, this is how I became a sport and why I never even had a fair shot in the whole thing. Because before you decide if you agree or disagree with me, because I know a lot of people out there don't and they hate me and they feel like they can say whatever they want about me online. They can say, oh, well, I heard from so and so that so and so did so and so at so and so. Look, have I been in a couple of incidences? Sure, because apparently, and it's been made very clear to me through other statements and whatnot, that in Lorraine, it's not about it's about who you know, right? Like, if you're not friends with everybody, if you're not everyone's buddy, if you disagree with somebody, I don't mean everyone, but I guess certain people feel it's okay, and others feel it's okay to encourage online the idea that instead of using your big boy and girl words, that you should be violent. Well, that's why the busted paper is so full of people all the time. I'm not going to do that. And I know you guys want to say I am. All I don't want to do is be touched. And I don't know why people would think that they can do that. I don't like to be touched. I don't think anyone really, I mean, anybody else wouldn't want to be touched either. And if you disagree with my words, they're just words. I get it. I talk a lot. That's your big issue. So if somebody talks a lot, beat the shit out of them. I got you. But hey, I digress. It's not a personality conflict. They just need to understand this terrain that I was on. It was loose. And it didn't happen in a vacuum either. It did not happen because I rubbed one person the wrong way. It didn't happen because I failed somehow to follow the rules. What made this inevitable was the alignment. The chief, the mayor, the law department, the safety service director, the next safety service director, it all became moving in the same direction. There was no neutral ground left for me, the citizen, Aaron, to stand on. And I was being attacked as me, Aaron, the social worker, while trying to be me, Aaron, the citizen at the first. And so then that's why that McCann angle matters so much more, even now. McCann is no longer the chief, but he was the ignition point. He was the one that made the critical decision that changed everything. Instead of treating my complaints, records, requests, and advocacy as what they were, lawful civic conduct, he reframed them as a personal problem, not legal problem, not a policy dispute, a personal problem. And once a police chief does that, everything downstream changes. Everything upstream changes. Shit. Um, a police chief is not just another opinion in the room, guys. When a chief uses words like disruptive, concerning, unstable, or unhinged, those words don't just stay contained. They travel. They follow you into other offices. They influence how other officials talk about you when you're not in the room. They shape exactly how you are perceived before anyone ever bothers to check.
whether the description fits the facts or not. And the best part is, from an institutional perspective, is that none of it requires finding. No hearing, no adjudication, no sustained violations, just vibes with a badge, right? That's the moment accountability turns into retaliation. Even if no one ever uses that word out loud, McCann did not operate in isolation. And this is where that story gets more uncomfortable for City Hall. Because Mayor Jack Bradley, he didn't step in and say, hey, this is a constituent exercising statutory rights. Answer the records request. Answer the complaint. Follow the law. He did not say, slow down. We need to manage critics by we don't need to manage these critics by character assassination. Instead, his office became part of the insulation layer, right? Emails stopped getting answered. Access issues were minimized. Problems were reframed as, nuisances. And the message, while never written out plainly, was clear enough that me, Aaron, was not someone to engage. I was someone to wait out. Silence from the mayor is not neutrality. Silence from the mayor is instruction. When the mayor allows a citizen to be treated as inconvenience rather than a constituent, every department underneath him learns a lesson real quick. And that's the problem, is that continues to happen all across the walkway, because Bradley forgot one important thing. And I'm in a public area, bro.
Pretty soon what he's going to do is he's going to say that he can't continue with the meeting because you won't exit.
And that's not my problem. You work for me.
I don't work for you.
You do work for me. I pay taxes. You work for the city of Lorraine. No, there's no agree to disagree, Mayor. Mayor, there's no agree to disagree.
And what they're going to do is they'll just close the meeting.
Let's just close the meeting. Oh my God. We'll just close the meeting down. Because transparency is not something we want in Lorraine City. No, not here. In Lorraine City, we want the opposite of transparency. Murky waters. Murky like the lake that we live on. Leningrad on the lake, baby. Leningrad on the lake. That's all I can say. I moved to what I can only appeal to, the most communist socialist government I've ever seen in my life in the United States of America. I thought Rupert, Idaho was bad. I mean, McCann started using a word like vexatious, right? Other people picked it up to the point where a local prominent attorney had the balls to call me that in a letter that he sent to somebody. I don't understand why people continue to use language that's defamatory without understanding what it's about. If anyone in this entire county, city, state thinks I'm a vexatious litigant, first go look what that means up. Then go check Ohio and Idaho rosters and see if I'm on it. And if I'm not, then oops, that might be a little bit of slander. And that's where they came up with the term vexatious complainant. You can't just make shit up. Well, I mean, they can. But then there's the law department, where things are supposed to go to get boring and procedural and safe. And we're going to talk about that at the end. We got Assistant Law Director Patrick Levesque out there. Is it Patrick Levesque? Joseph Levesque. I forget. We'll just call him Levesque. Did not act as a guardrail. He acted as a buffer, right? Instead of issuing clean, appealable denials under Ohio law, the response was delay, deny. Instead of correcting mischaracterizations, they were allowed to linger. Instead of drawing bright legal. I don't really care. If you just sent me his first name, I don't care. Yeah, Joe, whatever. I don't give a shit. Who cares what his first name is? Fuck Levesque. Okay? This guy's trying to be a fucking law director in another city, all while being an assistant law director in all city, all while working with his buddy, Rocky Radev, the assistant law director in our city, but the mayor. And give me a fucking break. Wow. Yeah. Let's bring up Joseph fucking Levesque. This guy's got his dick in more fucking ponds than I've ever seen in my life. He works in every fucking courtroom. How can he be even remotely fucking, even remotely impartial with anyone at this point? Jesus Christ, man. Don't even get me started on this guy. This prick denied my emails for fucking ever. ever in a day. And what I get in return? Not even a fucking I'm sorry when he had to give them all to me. Oh wait, that's right. He didn't give them all to me. Chief Fowling gave them to me, as is my right. Because again, why the fuck are you guys redacting emails? You shouldn't send anything in an open public email that is secure. So if you're redacting public emails that you send back and forth, you've already fucked up. Anyway, sorry. You can't send me shit like that. God damn it, Garen, what? Oh, shit. Now look what happened. Now it tried to text everything I just said to Garen back. Anyway, Levesque acted as a guardrail, or not as a guardrail. He was more of a buffer, right? Instead of doing the right thing as he was supposed to, and drawing bright legal lines, he just let everything stay ambiguous enough to drain time, energy, and resources forever. For over a year, this guy was like, "Oh, they don't exist." Bueller. I mean, this dude is literally the king of denial. Joseph fucking Levesque says no more times than a virgin in a strip club. Like, this man's main answer is no. Like in that movie Enchanted, when she's like, "Is that all you know how to say? No, 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 no." He's like, "No, no, no." It's always no with that motherfucker. His wife must be pissed. "Baby, tonight? No. Can I get a little? No. But no." Man, this isn't incompetence, it's attrition. Because when the law department refuses to resolve any of its disputes cleanly, it forces citizen into a choice we should never have to have made. Either we walk away or we litigate. And once you litigate, congratulations, you've now earned a new label. That's right, folks. You are now adversarial. You're litigious. I love that word. You're litigious. You are very difficult. The fact that you were forced into court by delay somehow becomes proof that you are the problem. It's a neat fucking trick. And then when you get to Ray fucking Carry On, whose role should have been oversight, safety service is not supposed to be the place where concerns about police conduct are evaluated independently. It is supposed to be where escalation stops. Instead, what we got was reinforcement. Issues I raised about policy violations were not examined naturally. No. They were absorbed into the same narrative. I was treated as if someone was identifying risk. I was treated as the risk itself. At that point, the system was closed. Think about what that means in practical terms. The former police chief has labeled you. The mayor does not correct it. The law department delays instead of resolving. Safety service, they don't give a shit, right? They don't intervene. Every door a citizen is told to knock on is either silent or already aligned against you. So I asked the obvious question. And I want you to sit with it for a little while. What chance did I really have? I mean, I'm not asking for your sympathy. Shit, I'm not even asking for your empathy. This is just me describing the architecture. This is just the fucking facts. Take them or leave them. I don't make the facts. I don't make the truth. I just tell it. So if you're a citizen and you're dealing with all this stuff, and they all treat your lawful conduct as disruptive, then when exactly are you supposed to go? Who exactly do I have left to appeal to? And at what point am I supposed to realize that the process itself has become the punishment? This is why I keep using the word sport, right? The sport of hating Aaron. Because once that alignment exists, everyone else learns from the rules. The staff mirror the tone. Other officials take cues. Outside actors feel safe escalating because they sense the institutional backing. Online hostility grows. No one in authority ever contradicts it. The pile-on is not spontaneous. It's permission. And here's the most important part. The part people really kind of fucking need to stop and hear. None of this required them to prove I was wrong or guilty of anything. They never defeated my arguments. They didn't disprove the records. They didn't prevail on the merits. They simply made me the problem to be managed, just like other people. And that's why it was never a fair fight. There's never me versus one official, me versus the government. It was me versus a coordinated silence, protected by power, justified by language, and enforced through attrition. And I thought I might have had an ally in defeating that in Jack Hall. I guess I thought wrong. But once you understand that, everything else in this story makes sense. The charges, the rumors, the character attacks, the delays, the refusals, the way the narrative kept shifting, following me no matter how the facts or how often the facts caught up. It's not chaos, it's architecture. It explains why the sport of hating Aaron didn't just happen. It was built, folks. So I'm going to take a super quick break here and give a word from our sponsors, and I'll be right back. Hey there, folks. If you really want to know what's happening in your hometown, the place to go is Lorain Daily and Vermilion Daily. From city council and school boards to local businesses, community events, and neighborhood stories, these outlets cover what the big media ignores. This is hyper-local news for real people in real communities. Visit Lorain Daily and VermilionDaily.com today. Read it, share it, support local journalism, because your community deserves coverage that actually lives here. I don't know why it always does that. All right, that brings us to our next section. Here is like we look into how lawful conduct became the disruption and why that was the point, right? And there was I guess this is the part of the story where people usually will say something like, "Well, there must have been a better way of doing it, Aaron." Right? I heard that a lot. Don't cuss. Don't do this. Be more godlike. Be less godlike. We like what you're doing. We hate what you're doing. People would get along with you better, hear you better if you weren't such an asshole. I don't know how to be something I am an asshole. Like, I don't know what you guys want from me. I mean, you don't watch me because I'm a fucking nice guy. That was exactly why I wanted to run for office. Not because I'm a nice guy. Who wants a fucking nice guy in office? Right? Let's just get this straight. I don't know if I've said this enough since the election. Am I sad that I didn't get elected? Absolutely not. I was actually relieved. What do I know about government and running and being in office? I would have done my absolute best and I would have learned everything there was to learn about it. I would have done everything was asked of me. I would have worked so hard at it because that's my nature. But as all people with ADHD can tell you, I wouldn't have started studying until the night before. So in the grand scheme of things, that's why it became that way. Maybe you should have gone through the proper channels. And I did. And it sounds reasonable until you actually understand the proper channels are supposed to look like by policy, statute, and professional ethics. Because there is a right way to raise concerns, a right way to request records, a right way to challenge government action. And I followed that precisely. I've even given other people that diagram. Not loosely, not emotionally, not outside the system. I did exactly what the rules require, right? Which is precisely why this became a problem for everybody. Because I was doing it right. Policy does not stay quiet. It doesn't say stay quiet. Policy says document. Policy says submit concerns in writing. Policy says cite the statute, cite the rule, preserve the record, escalate when internal remedies fail. This is not radical behavior, folks. Timelines. Well, yeah, like I get what you're saying. The problem with the timeline here is that it stretches over 2 years. So just imagine this: McCann stuff starts here, the rest starts later. That's kind of where it went. But I don't see a whole lot of what's going on in the chat here very often. But I'm sorry. Anyway, policy doesn't stay quiet. Policy says document. Policy says submit concerns in writing. Policy says cite the statute, cite the rule, preserve the record, escalate internal remedies fail. It's not radical behavior. It's compliance. That's how it's supposed to work, right? Inside the system that claims to value transparency and professionalism. The moment people suggest that following those steps is disruptive, what's really saying that the process only works if you stop before it becomes inconvenient? And if you want timelines, I mean, I guess this all started in 23 and carried into late 24 till McCann left. When he left in 25, and part of the reason he left was because of the Middlebrooks incident, which exposed him for his retaliatory behavior. And I was the key behind the Middlebrooks incident. So that's kind of where all that went. But what they're really saying is the process only works if you stop before it gets inconvenient for them. Because I filed public records requests in writing, narrowly tailored, citing the statute, asking for emails, reports, policies, communications. The law explicitly defines as public. This isn't harassment. It's a mechanism that the law provides when the government operates in your name. And when a request is delayed, denied, or ignored, the law doesn't just go, and move on. The law says challenge it, appeal it, preserve the record. It's not aggressive behavior. That's how the system working exactly as it's designed. Instead of responding cleanly, records requests were rebranded as excessive. Instead of issuing appealable denials, there were delays, deflections. Instead of producing records, there were explanations. And when I followed up the policy, as policy required, the follow-up was no longer treated as diligence. It was treated as me being aggressive. The action didn't change. Only the label did. Just an email. At the same time, I'm raising concerns about something that should have been uncontroversial and frankly should have been alarming anyone paying attention. You know, in the beginning, besides my service dog incident, which I don't really consider an incident because it's one that happens a lot where people don't understand the limits and non-limits of a service animal, which, whatever. And the initial incident that occurred between me and McCann really was about me talking about the West 27th Street incident. I was raising concerns, about why they had the kids from that incident as pictures online. And then they had all their school records online. And then they had some juvenile court documents online. And being the anal retentive ass that I am, I saw the documents online. I was like, those aren't supposed to be online. And I get it. They had access to them through a subpoena. And I've advocated for this time and time again. I'm not going to go into an entire detailed podcast again about that. But I'm just going to say that I advocated for 2 years to get that kid's information down off the internet, well until he was an adult. The state law says we don't put kids' pictures, online in that fashion. And the police department got them through legal means, but then illegally displayed them. And it was not a FERPA violation because FERPA applies to the schools. It was not a HIPAA violation because that applies to doctors and whatnot. But it was an overall privacy concern that we're not supposed to release those records online. I fought for 2 years to get them down. In the grand scheme of things, McCann wanted to make the Hildress in that house a lesson on West 27th Street. And that's what he was going to do. And I was shitting on that. And then the other problem became is that then the Facebook took off because then he posted it all online and it just went ape shit viral because the Hildress posted their security footage. And then the civil rights lawyer guy got a hold of it. And then it became crazy. Then people were going onto the website and just hammering the Lorain police. And suddenly that was my fault. Lorraine Ritchie, everybody was saying, well, that's Aaron's fault, right? I didn't put that video online, but these were the records that were involving minors tied to juvenile court matters. They had juvenile court names on them. That's legal and ethical concerns. I asked around the court. They said, hey, that's not supposed to be online. So I didn't do it casually. I raised it in writing. I wrote in a letter to Chief McCann. I cited confidentiality obligations. I cited juvenile protections. I cited the risk to the children whose information was being exposed. That advocacy did not make me popular. Instead of treating those concerns as a serious compliance issue, right, the response shifted a little bit. It shifted away from the substance and towards me. The issue was no longer whether juvenile records were being improperly disclosed. The issue became my persistence in pointing it out. The moment the argument couldn't be easily dismissed, right, the focus moved to the tone, the frequency, the personality, me. The pattern repeated itself exactly. Now, I also raised these concerns about policy violations through formal complaints that cited the department's own rules. Back to them. That's how internal accountability is supposed to work. You identify the policy, you identify the deviation, you request a review. It's not disruption. That's quality control. Hey, but when the violation could not be easily brushed aside, again, framing changes. Suddenly the issue is not whether the policy had been followed. Suddenly it's the issue is airing. I show up for City Hall during business hours for lawful purposes to observe, to ask questions, to request access to public information we're entitled to. Somehow being present becomes disruptive because I want to ask questions. It becomes confrontational. Standing in a public lobby becomes looming. Policy didn't change. The narrative did. Me. That's why all this sarcasm earns its place, because the contradiction is obvious. In this system, you are encouraged to participate as long as you participate passively. You are welcome to observe as long as you do not see anything. And whatever you do, you're free to speak as long as you don't say anything that requires an answer. And the moment you insist that a policy be followed, the moment you refuse informal brush-offs, the longer you're just going to be told you're no longer going to be engaged. You're the problem. It's not accidental, it's design. Policy-based advocacy is dangerous to systems that rely on discretion and silence. You cannot dismiss it as an opinion ever. You cannot wave it away as a misunderstanding. It forces yes or no answers. Is it right or is it wrong? Is it policy or is it not? Yes, no. Yes, no. Not, well, no, shut the fuck up. Yes, no. Well, when officials don't want to give those answers, which they never do, the easiest move is to make the advocate the issue. Me. Yes, no. Persistence becomes obsession. Cuckoo. Documentation becomes fixation. Cuckoo. Escalation becomes instability. Cuckoo. Without changing what I actually did, my actions were described as something completely different. Not as what I was supposed to do lawfully as a social worker, exactly what I was challenged to do by my ethical code, exactly what I'm supposed to do by all rights laws and ORC, right? They took lawful conduct that was mandated by the state for me as a social worker and rebranded as disruption. I mean, honestly, I can't even believe my own association, which I just started kind of CCing a little bit on this, isn't getting involved to say, what the fuck? Because really what this is teaching all social workers is that, just like McCann said, Aaron's the reason we don't work with social workers in Lorraine Police. Imagine that. Imagine you, one social worker, were the reason that a chief of police decided all social workers were bad. It's easy to understand why he's a racist and a homophobe. Well, now we get to the part of the story that's been deliberately disoriented. At a certain point, I was told not to advocate publicly under my real name on social media, Aaron Knapp. Not that it violated the code of ethics. In fact, my boss kind of told me explicitly that they couldn't tell me to stop because advocacy is protected underneath the professional code. I wasn't told not to do it publicly. I was told that if I continued, they could stop working with me. That's not ethics. That's pressure dressed up as concern. So yeah, I use pseudonym accounts, George Patton, not to deceive, not to hide misconduct, but because I was placed into an impossible position where I was expected to continue advocating while also making myself invisible, which I thought defeated the purpose because I like using my licensure because it gave me the reason why I was doing it. Otherwise, why am I doing it? If I don't have the license that requires me to do it, then I'm just some grumpy jerk. I don't do this because I want to. I do it because I'm mandated to. Like, this is what they drilled into my head. This was my purpose. You're going to take a disabled vet, give him a brand new purpose, and they get mad at him for using it? Fuck off. But hey, whatever. You want to place people in impossible positions, I'll go on advocating from here. I complied with the pressure without abandoning the work. I kept doing the work, and then I just made another account. But, people like Lorraine Ritchie haunted me, followed me, and predictably that compliance became the next weapon. The response to the institutional intimidation was reframed as evidence of wrongdoing. The reversal is not confusion, it's convenience. There's this accusation that then I falsely represented myself as an officer of the court And that needs to be addressed plainly. At the time it came up, I was not exaggerating or posturing. I emailed McCann. I said it. I'd already been sworn in as a GAL. I'd already assumed the role as a GAL. I had disclosed it to my supervisor, to the courts. I had reported it to the court. There was no ambiguity inside the system itself. I was, in fact, an officer of the court. The website itself said it. They later tried to deny it until I showed it to them. I mean, imagine the face of Emily Kirshner, the court administrator, when I had her read her own website that said I was an officer of the court. Jackasses. Anyone familiar with that process knows it. Pretending otherwise is not a misunderstanding. It's opportunism. Instead of correcting the record, the phrase itself was weaponized, not because it was inaccurate, because it was useful. When you can't attack the substance, you attack the phrasing. When you can't disprove the record, you nitpick the language. And when you cannot deny authorization, you pretend words are the offense. That's what I mean when I call it a penny ante bullshit fucking complaint. And then there was the moment that stripped away any remaining plausible deniability, right? At one point, Sherry Glass was outside of, I've said it, this story 1,000 times, it was outside of Renounce Denounce, it was right across from City Hall and the police station. And she came there just to speak to the class that was, I think, graduating or something, or about to graduate from Renounce Denounce, or just to come in and talk because the judges engage with the kids at that level. And she came in, to speak. And I've been around her and other judges, and she's very pleasant. She'll speak to you. And so we were outside this formal setting, and she didn't know really who she was talking to other than a guy that's always in Crossroads, a social worker that works there. And basically kind of told me plainly that I was being fired because McCann had complained to the courts, and it wasn't about my performance. I guess it was not about ethics. It was because of the complaint from McCann, right? And she's going on about that man blames everyone but himself for all his own problems all the time. And now we've got to fire some guy because he came to us complaining about the guy. And not knowing that the guy was this guy, right? And so that admission mattered precisely because it was unguarded. I heard it with my own ears. She can deny it, but she told me it was happening beforehand. That McCann went in and bitched and moaned to the courts to get me fired, and they gave in. The judges gave in to McCann, basically to satisfy him. That's it. That's what Judge Sherry Glass said to my face. I don't care what anyone else says. I heard it. She said it. Fuck off. Anyway, nothing was corrected. No reversal, no acknowledgement, no accountability. The system closed ranks and waited for the noise to pass. Let's be honest about what actually happened. I followed their policies. I documented, I escalated when required. I advocated for protection of juvenile records. I disclosed my status accurately, and every one of those actions was later used as a reason to attack me. It's not a coincidence. That's an instruction. One disruption was established as a label. It was justified everything that came next. Restricted access, delayed responses, side conversations about concern, complaints that didn't need to succeed to do damage. So when you hear words like disruptive or concerning attached to my name, I understand what that really means. They mean I did exactly what policy says to do. I did not stop when it became inconvenient for the people in charge. And that's the hinge this entire story turns on, is that once you see that, you stop asking what I did wrong and you start asking, well, who benefited from calling it wrong? That's the most next logical answer. So now we get into this whole, the charges, the complaints, and the rumor economy. This is the point where people often say something like, well, if there were charges or complaints, there must have been something to them, right? The assumption is exactly how this system works. It's exactly why it's so dangerous. Because in a system, the allegation itself does the work. Doesn't have to be true. Doesn't have to be proven. Doesn't have to exist long enough to be repeated, written down, quietly relied on by people who want distance without accountability. What happened here was not a misunderstanding. It was not a statement taken out of context. It wasn't a statement attributed to me that I never said. Or it was actually a statement attributed to me that I never said, never wrote, never communicated in any form, no recording, no message, no post, no email. It was just only an allegation that somebody claimed I had said something violent and extreme without any primary source to support it. That matters. Because once that false statement was attributed to me, it began to move through the system as if it were real. People repeated it, others regurgitated it secondhand. And when those witnesses were later confronted with the absence of evidence, the statement was either recanted or walked back. And that goes to that whole restraining order case that came up against me, right? Suddenly there was no evidence. Suddenly John Moreau wasn't there. Even today, Aiden Fogel's come back and said, hey, it never happened. I never said it. That Heather Chapin either misquoted or just made it up. I don't know. But Aiden is claiming to be the one she heard it from. Well, let me rephrase that. Aiden is saying he is the one who supposedly she heard it from, but he never said that. And then she repeated it supposedly to McCann, and then somehow it went to 911. I don't know. But I don't know how it keeps getting repeated. For the record, if I was going to do something as stupid as that, why would you put a hit out on anyone? For the record, I heard the other day I was listening to this story on, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a radio show and they were talking about a lady that got arrested. And I see this all the time too. You see celebrity superstar, like people are not really like B-rate superstars, like the wife of the husband of the winner of Big Brother 6 hired a hitman to kill him after they were estranged over the Big Brother trophy or some shit. You're like, what? Big Brother? But no, it boils down to you see these things happen and you're like, all right, how did this? No. Like, how do you think that hiring a hit person would ever work? It doesn't work like you think it does. It's not like the movies, I would assume. And anyway, why would you do it? Like, nobody's just out there. I would hope nobody's out there selling those services. Otherwise, I'd probably be really dead. But even if they are offering those services, like, why would you, a citizen, even if you're not super law-abiding, want to do something like that? There's just so much risk involved for so little reward when you can just ignore somebody. But I definitely haven't put no hit out on nobody, and I definitely don't want to see anybody unalive, and I definitely don't want to do that to anybody. I definitely am nonviolent. And, so when that story came out and all that stuff came down, I was like, well, I knew it wasn't true, but it didn't stop it from being spread to the newspaper. It didn't stop the Chronicle from reporting what normally would never be reported, like in front page news. I mean, that's the funny thing. That's why it carried the weight, was because it was the chief. Well, that and apparently Heather Chapin. Wow, great news, Heather. that it was only an allegation that someone claimed, Moreau, that I had said something violent and extreme without primary source to support it. That matters. Once that false statement was attributed to me, it began to move through the system. It just was like, use that term, but it was like diarrhea. It just ran right through you. Like Montezuma's revenge. People repeated it. Others regurgitated secondhand. It became news story after news story after news story. Candidate threatens Amherst woman. Hilton nixes protection order. She nix it. They couldn't move forward. You guys can say what you want, okay? The one part everybody overlooks in that case is that I handed her lawyer a file. Now, I don't know if she saw it, but he did. He knows what's in that file, don't you, Gerald? And when I handed that file to Gerald, I just said, hey, before you do anything else as your attorney, you should see this, because he handed me, the notice of appearance. He says, well, this for you. Well, this for you. Everybody rolled into that hearing thinking I was a fucking idiot. I've been in court more times than I care to count. I've been witness in court. I've been, testified in court as a social worker. More importantly, I've been the attorney in court. I was telling my attorney the other day, I'm the only person I know that they forced in Idaho to practice law. At least that's the way I saw it. I went back. It was a civil case. My ex's boyfriend or husband had her and I had a lot of history with my daughter, and mental health issues and CPS and social work and all this stuff. It was an ongoing train wreck. We're luckily all better now, especially for my daughter's sake. But it was a rough go of things. And so her husband called my love of my life here in Avon Lake and basically was harassing her. And one thing that harassed me, but when he called her, that was against the rules. And so I called Idaho and I wanted to charge him, and they didn't want to do it. They're like, it's just a phone call, right? It's just a phone call. He just called. I'm like, yeah, but that was the only thing the order said not to do. It would be like, look, I know it, and again, I'm going to use something stupid, but I feel like I'm going to sneeze here in a minute. But imagine you had a court order that says you can't whistle. And that's all you were doing was whistling. And, we don't know why. Maybe because your whistling was doing something bad and caused, but you did it. Well, that's what he did. And so I flew all the way to Idaho to charge him because they didn't want to do it. And so I charged him civilly with the violating the order, right? It's the contempt of court. So I charged him with contempt of court. And when I got there, I thought I was showing up for a hearing to watch him get charged with contempt of court. Instead, they were like, they gave him an attorney because it was quasi-criminal. So they assigned him a public defender. And they said, Mr. Knapp, it's your case. What? They wanted me to try that motherfucker. So I did. Guess who won? So the only time I've ever prosecuted a guy in court, I won. Just for the record. I'm batting 1,000. He got probation and no time served. Had to be on probation for 2 years. And then as I was leaving the courtroom that day, the the city prosecutor in the other city over that was the actual criminal prosecutor on this case decided he was going to suddenly prosecute him too. And I was like, isn't that double jeopardy? He's like, no, yours was civil, mine was criminal. I was like, but mine was quasi-criminal. I mean, again, see, they're willing to bend the rules when they want to bend the rules. I mean, imagine my attorney at the time in Idaho left me to become a district attorney or an ADA. And as an ADA, he tried to prosecute my ex for child abuse of my daughter after he had represented me in court and my daughter. I mean, I like the guy. I love the guy. I think he was a great attorney for me, but I also think that was the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. But that's the way the law works. That's where I cut my teeth. That's where they got this stupid thought in their head that I've suddenly got vexatious litigant because they see a pre-filing order. If these attorneys understood anything about anything, which apparently they don't around here any more than they did in Idaho, they're all so sure of themselves that they can never believe that somebody that doesn't have a law degree suddenly doesn't understand the law. Well, I'm not allowed to practice law, but the law seems to find a lot of ways to throw me into that boat. And the other issue on that is I am a pro se litigant. I've done so multiple times. So if you refer to me as a vexatious litigant, that's somebody that sues over God, money, like, oh, you can't put in God we trust on money. And they're going to be like, at some point, they're like, Mr. Knapp, you can't keep bringing suits. You keep paying money to bring the suit, but it's frivolous. It means nothing. You can't bring frivolous suits that mean nothing, have no basis. Just like why Garen was always so happy when he talked to people about, well, they found there was cause. As long as there's cause to bring the suit, it's not frivolous. So to call someone vexatious is so insulting because it means they're doing so with frivolity. And I do nothing with frivolity. I don't find our court frivolous at all. I find it very serious, and I would never file something out of frivolity. But if somebody continues a narrative because they read a pre-filing order in Idaho. Now, if you're an attorney, you should know what a pre-filing order is. You should go look it up in Idaho what a pre-filing order is. I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm just saying, if you look it up, you'll see I'm the only person to go on and off the Idaho vexatious litigant list. So that makes me not a vexatious litigant. Because in Idaho, the way they do it is they put you on a pre-filing order, which means you go on the list no matter what until you win. Then you come off. Well, if my name's not on the list, that means I did what? Win. Because that's all I do. But it was my ex's attorney my ex owed like $16 some odd thousand to, that kept having to fight me, that kept losing to me in civil court in custody case, that filed it. So of course, you guys can't believe everything you read. You have to do some research. especially the attorneys. I know you're busy, guys, but if you're going to make, if you're Rosenbaum out there trying to make $320 an hour, you better at least do a little bit of fucking research, man. But whatever. Once a false statement is attributed to me, it began to move through the system like it was real. People repeated it. They regurgitated that whole bullshit about I wanted somebody unalive, which is crazy. I don't think any of you should be unalive. That's insane. To have so much anger and hatred in your heart for an individual that you would want them unalived is beyond me. I can understand maybe if someone. I've never been in a situation where my loved one has been, unalived in a way where it was classified as a crime of murder or something like that. Or I've never been the victim of a forcible type of sexual attack. So maybe there's a circumstance where I, as a human, could hate someone. I don't know. But I don't really see it because I feel like to hate something, you have to have loved it first. So I just don't ever understand that, why people get so angry at something that they're like that. But whatever. The problem is that the damage was already done. The falsehood survived inside the institutions. The retraction never travels as far as the accusation. So despite the lack of evidence and despite the lack of, the fact that law enforcement did not find the allegation credible, the claim did not die. Instead, it's repurposed. TH, has parlayed that fabricated attribution into multiple civil complaints against me. I think it was like 4 to 6 separate filings at the sheriff's department, depending on how you count them, and ultimately into a temporary protection order. She got that from DZOR. Now, that escalation occurred even though the sheriff's office did not substantiate the underlying claim. In fact, county prosecutor in Oberlin at the time, Merca, who's now our new judge, decided that this was ultimately BS and chose not to charge. She's like, no. And yet this is where the system failed in a way that it cannot be explained as caution. Even after the allegation was challenged, even after the witnesses recanted, even after the lack of evidence was clear, even after the false statement was never formally corrected across the institutions that had received it, no one sent a memo saying this claim is unsupported, right? No one clarified this allegation is false. The paper remained, the context remained. There's water bottles now, sweetie. And the silence allowed the allegation to keep doing its work. In court, her own attorney, as I said earlier, ultimately withdrew the claim. It couldn't be sustained because of that little pamphlet I handed him, because it showed everything she'd said, everything she'd done, all of the violent statements she had made, all of the things that swayed the side that she was ever, ever, ever afraid of me. And if you've ever heard her speak online, you know for a fact she is not at all afraid of me. She has a problem talking about me. She has a problem bringing up my kid and acting like we don't have a great relationship when we have a great relationship. Like, she talks about my home. What?
Actual kiss. I love you.
Good night. I love you too.
I hate VR, by the way. Gives me a migraine.
Well, you seem to be on it a lot.
Gives me a migraine.
Well, I mean, okay, I get you. Good night. I love you. See you tomorrow. It can't be defended, right? And yet, even though after all the withdrawals, she still continued to publicly contend that I put a hit out on her for 30 grand of all things. I had 30 grand. I ain't wasting it on her. Fuck that. That's crazy. I got 30 grand and drinks are on me. I've never bought drinks in my life, but I actually told my kid, if I had 30 grand, I'm not buying drinks. Why would I give you my money? I don't do that ever. Much to certain people's otherwise statements, I don't do that. But it's not only false, it's defamatory. It persists precisely because it's already been laundered through official channels once before. This is rumor economy in its purest form, folks. A lie attributed to me. The lie is repeated. The repetition becomes paper. The paper becomes context. The context becomes justification. By the time the lie is exposed, the system's already moved on, carrying the residue with it. It's like trying to roll, I guess a sticky joint and then, trying to not carry that stickiness onto other stuff from your fingers or whatever they call it. You have the residue, so to speak, with it. That's what makes this especially destructive, is that clearing your name does not undo the hesitation it creates. Employers don't ask whether the allegation was false. They ask why it existed at all. Courts don't ask whether it was recanted. They ask whether it created a concern. Institutions do not ask whether the claim collapsed. They ask whether it posed a risk. That's how the allegation becomes the punishment. And notice, who never pays a price for it, right? Not the person who fabricated the attribution, not the people who repeated it without verification, not the institutions that failed to correct the record. The only person who bears the cost is the person it was attributed to or attached to. So when people ask why I'm still talking about the charges, the complaints, and the rumors here, here's the answer, folks. Because those things were never about protecting anyone. They're about creating a justification to marginalize me without ever having to prove I did anything wrong. And that's the part that should make everyone listening uncomfortable. If a false statement can be attributed to someone, repeated without evidence, recanted without consequence, and it was recanted, Tia has no witnesses. Go get your witness. Their witness has already recanted personally to me. Well, actually, didn't recant, said I never said it. Better yet, if a false statement can be attributed to someone, repeated without evidence, recanted without consequence, and still reused publicly a year later, then the issue is not me. The issue is a system that allows lies to be permanent while truth has an expiration date, right? And I'm not the only one they've done this to. I can give you a list. It's not a flaw. It's a warning. Once you understand that, the next question is going to be unavoidable, folks. What happens when the process succeeds? When the rumor economy does not just isolate someone, right, but actually takes their livelihood. And that's where we go next. The rumors of... We're going to slip a little bit into this idea around Lorraine that follows me, that seems like it's some sort of self-evident truth in regards to me. But in the meantime, I'm going to take a quick break here real quick, and we will return after this announcement from our sponsors. If you own a business and you want to reach customers right here in Lorain County and Vermilion, this is your opportunity, folks. Advertising space is now available in Lorain Daily, Vermilion Daily, and DNC Radio. That means your business can reach local readers, local listeners, and a highly engaged community audience. And here's a bonus. For a small add-on fee, your business will also be advertised once per episode on my podcast, Unplugged with Aaron Knapp, as long as your ad remains active on one of those two platforms. This is web exposure plus podcast exposure in one package. If you're interested in advertising, contact me now to reserve your spot through Facebook, email, or reach out directly. Ad space is limited and local visibility matters, folks. All right. It's part of what I'm talking about. And this isn't about just one particular incident, okay? Because I know that we've talked about this a lot, and I'm not bringing it back up because I'm involved in litigation in regards to this. But the theory is what I'm discussing. The theory that I'm this aggressive person that comes after people. Look, I play an aggressive a-hole online. Like, I don't like confrontation in public. If you confront me, I freeze. And so, yeah, I may flip you off. I may respond to you, but I'm not going to move. I'm not going to come to you ever. And that's following me through Lorraine like some sort of self-evident truth, repeated as often people stop asking me whether it's real. They claim that I'm the aggressor. I'm not. You can't call me an aggressor and then a pussy in the same fucking word. Like, I don't even understand that. But I'm constantly getting into fights, they say. I'm being kicked out of bars and establishments because I'm some kind of problem presence. I just go there, get drunk, start doing dumb shit, right? It's so casually and confidently. It's almost like people, always by people who weren't even present. I mean, there's one guy recently just keeps repeating it over and over and over again. I'm not going to say his name. I'm not going to give him that kind of credit, but I know that he's saying it on my friend's post. Like, if she posts something of mine, suddenly we got to talk about Aaron. And I'm like, guys, look, I know you think at the offshore something crazy happened. I think that's the name of the bar. I don't even know the name of the bar. I know that Jazz and I went to pick somebody up during my campaign. who was at this establishment. When we got there, they did not like that I was wearing my Republican hoodie, and they told me that Trump was the root of all evil and began to bash me. And then after I finally got tired of the guy yelling at me and I flipped him off because that was it. I'm not saying I did anything else, but I mean, these are just words. He gets up from his seat, walks all the way around and starts to come at me. And then that leaves this pushing and shoving thing. Well, not by me, because I kept my back turned. I always hope that if I keep my back turned to a man, it'll show them I'm acquiescing. It's almost like a dog rolling over on his belly. If I don't turn to face you and put my dukes up, then how am I fighting you? That's what I did at the one place. That's what I did at this place. And Jocelyn can attest to that. She was there. The guy pushed her. I have an issue with him. The other one you're talking about, again, a customers, regulars touch me and I become the problem. I just don't want to be touched. And then people try to move me and I freeze. And I try to tell people that I'm not trying to stay in your establishment. I'm trying to leave. But when you grab me, and again, everyone seems to think that's okay. But I'm not getting kicked out of all these establishments because I'm there all the time drinking, doing all these things. I'm hardly ever out. It works, though, because it is vague. It's unexamined. It's culturally convenient. And I am hardly out. So it's hard to describe, like, well, if you went out 1,000 times and only did this once or twice, if he's a regular at every place in town, then it's a problem. But it's not a problem. But if it happens 3 or 4 times and you only go out a limited amount of time, suddenly more often than not, you're a problem. Well, no, more often than not, my mouth gets people annoyed, and then they think that the solution for that is to actually be physical. Now, what I've learned since moving to Lorraine is that there's a very specific and very shallow equation at work here. Masculinity is equated with violence. Loudness equated with strength. Physical intimidation is equated with credibility. Intellect, on the other hand, whoa, can't have any of that mambo jambo thinking shit going on around here, because that's a threat. If you speak in complete sentences and cite facts that people do not like or refuse to perform deference, in their eyes, you are not seen as confident. You're seen as a provoking something, right? I'm not just being confident in my facts. I'm provoking them because I won't agree with them. Well, hold on a second. It's hot as shit back here. My brother likes the heater on, and I do not. But I'm not provoking anything. I just like to talk. I mean, other people are like, oh, he's just talking. I'm sorry. I like to talk. Fuck off. When did that become a crime? Once that frame's set, though, not whatever happens is automatically and always be my fault. And that's the part that makes the rumor especially grotesque, is that I don't fight. I can't. You're right. I'm physically disabled in a way that makes physical altercations not just a little bit dangerous, but potentially catastrophic, right? Fighting for me is not a bad night that ends with bruises. It's the risk of real paralysis or death. There's nothing abstract about it, nothing macho about it, just simply a medical reality. The idea that I am out here instigating fights is not just false, it's fucking absurd. I mean, look at me. I'm not. Yet every time there's an incident, the story somehow arrives in the scene like that I'm framed as the aggressor, even when I did not lay a hand on anyone. Even when the witness confirmed that someone else initiated the contact. Even when the only thing I did was exist in the same space where someone decided that I didn't belong, which seems to happen a lot here. A lot of people have decided who belongs and who doesn't, right? In the international city, if you haven't been going to Beach Park with everybody or Lakeview Park with everybody, all your life, you're nobody. And unless you cow down and conform, you won't be accepted. And anything you say can and will be used against you and beaten into you later. But hey, cool. The only common denominator is not the violence on my part. The common denominator is that someone puts hands on me all the time. I don't do that. Almost without exception, the person who does that is always almost a regular. or a person that goes there a lot, somebody that they've been hanging out with on the freaking park since back in the day, someone who knows the bartender, someone who knows the owner, someone who's familiar enough with the space to assume that they're going to be protected. And Lorraine, that assumption is usually correct. I mean, the only bar in town I know that releases security footage is one. Most people want to keep that quiet because they don't want people thinking they're a problem bar. But hey, that assumption usually flies here. That's a town where no one you know. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. This is a town where who you know matters more so than what actually happened or whatnot, right? Outsiders don't get the benefit of the doubt. You never do. You're like Rambo, only like nerdy Rambo, I guess. I don't know. Regulars do. Citizens that have been here forever, people whose family names matter. That's who gets justice, right? That's how it starts. You don't share the local shorthand, the vernacular. You don't perform the expected version of masculinity. You speak plainly. You don't back down when someone's wrong. And that combination gets read as disrespect. And once that happens, physical intimidation becomes socially justified. Something goes wrong after that, story's already written, folks. He was an asshole. I mean, I'm well aware that there are people who find it offensive that I refuse to play along with their little script. I know that there's a particular kind of insecurity that cannot tolerate someone who will not just puff up and swing back and will not perform toughness on demand. To people who think violence is how men settle things, restraint looks like provocation. Silence looks like arrogance, and facts look like an insult. That's not my problem to solve. One example keeps getting twisted. Let's put it back on its feet. They keep talking about that offshore themed bar, whatever it was, right? It wasn't a fight. I was there to pick someone up. I got called. That's it. I'm waiting. An older, much shorter gentleman who had been drinking, sitting with two women, decided that he didn't like me. His political feelings were very strong, let's just say, but his balance was not. He left his stool, he waddled on over, and then attempted to put hands on me, and apparently aiming for my lower back because that's all I could feel. And I didn't shove him, I didn't strike him, I didn't escalate. I stood there, right? I absorbed the moment until it passed. Stood there with my back to him, almost like the wrestler on TV you see where the little mini Wee comes running up, and like Wee Man comes up and attacks the dude, and you're like, oh. But, a certain character out there goes onto my friends' pages and says, this little Oompa Loompa guy, and I supposedly, I instigated a fight with him. I was like, well, first off, I don't fight. Second off, he was tiny. He got mad. He came over. He was trying to swing at me. I remember his little arm was coming up, and it would stop like right here. And I was like, oh, look at that. I'm not going to fight this guy for no reason. Let me rephrase. I'm not going to fight anybody. I kept my back to him because I'm not going to turn and give him the front of my neck. I mean, it doesn't really matter what I give him because just like, certain people are just going to throw me on the ground and jump on me. But again, I can't control what others do. But my friend, my campaign manager gets involved. He shoves her, shoves me. I didn't shove him. I didn't strike him. I didn't escalate. Stood there and absorbed it. And then I left. Somehow this became a story about me being aggressive. Oh, well, look, you were kicked out of this place, this place, this place. Now I just wear a body camera everywhere I go. I don't even give a shit. Not because I'm paranoid, not because I'm looking for a confrontation, because I've learned how easily reality gets rewritten in this town when the wrong people get involved. Documentation is not a preference, folks. It's self-defense. You better fucking film everything here. People will lie on you quicker than shit. It's self-defense. When you're an outsider, you're not going to get presumed innocence. You get presumed guilt. You are expected to prove otherwise after the fact. So let me be clear, because clarity is the enemy of rumor. Don't tell my daughter that. Her name is Clarity. I do not fight. I love my kid too much for that. I don't instigate violence. I don't put hands on people. Every incident attached to my name involves someone else crossing a line physically because they became or felt entitled to do so. And the only thing that I'm guilty of in these moments is not responding in the way that seems this town wants me to. For the record, even the conversations that were had about TH in regards to, well, hey, I'm glad that she states that She exercises her Second Amendment right. I believe everybody should, and everybody should defend their home and their castle and their castle doctrine. And if anybody were to come into her home and do anything, she has every right to defend herself, and absolutely should. I can just promise you, it's never going to be me. I don't even care enough to do that, let alone do I want to invade someone else's home or do anything to harm someone else physically. And that doesn't mean, in the grand scheme of the politics game, that I don't want to remove people from office when they make bad decisions, but there are appropriate and inappropriate actions. And the first one there seems quite a bit inappropriate. I mean, especially for somebody that you've never really met and doesn't really matter to you and you don't really matter to them. She said it 1,000 times. I mean, I know she doesn't matter to me because I don't go anywhere she's at. Yeah, I did accidentally drive onto her apparently her trailer park street one day. Yeah, because my brother was taking a girl out that lived on the block over. But I don't, ew. But if keeping my hands to myself, refusing to perform fake toughness and be all like using my words instead of my fists makes me an outcast here, I guess then so be it. I'm gonna continue to do exactly that. I'm not gonna fight. If you want to hit me. But I'm gonna document everything. I'm gonna video everything. And I'll continue to say it plainly. Just keep your fucking hands to yourself. That's it. Use your big boy words. Stop pretending that violence is character. And then let's get into the next part here. We're going to go into our fourth section, which is the career kill shot. I know, look, you're going to have to get used to this. I typically end up doing long podcasts, I guess, at this point. And I haven't done one in a few days. And this is probably going to be my end of the year podcast. So we're going to get it all out tonight. So come, go as you please. But I'm going to be here for a little bit longer. We haven't even gotten to the end part where I talk about the last article I wrote with the law departments running the show. Previously appeared on parallel threads of hostility, insinuation. Wait, no, I don't like that. There's the point of the record where the theory collapses under the weight of the evidence and the story becomes unavoidable. What had previously appeared as parallel threads of hostility, right? Insinuation, informal pressure, resolves into one single coherent outcome. It's not a moment where the rule is broken on paper. It's more of a moment where a career is rendered non-viable without any documentation ever saying so. Careers like mine are not ended through formal termination. They are neutralized quietly through mechanisms that never really trigger appeal rights because nothing official happened. I don't have a letter from the court saying I did good or did bad. Nothing. There's no disciplinary finding to contest, no adverse action, letter to challenge. Instead, there's just delay, hesitation, and eventually disappearance. The work that once flowed naturally begins to require approvals that never arrive. The call is slow, the referral is then, the silence becomes permanent. What the newly documented communications made clear is how that outcome was manufactured by McCann and others. Other complaints existed in circulation, regardless of their merit. Once law enforcement emails were framed me as unstable or dangerous or concerning, once those characterizations were shared laterally with courts, administrators, and regulators, my professional standing changed in a way that cannot be reversed by exoneration without me moving out of the county. I could go back to Franklin County because Ohio State graduates are loved there. If I sold my home here or rented it out, which I wouldn't do because I wouldn't want to keep paying anything to the city. I could probably maybe find a job in Columbus if they don't call down here and get misinformed by Applewood. But Applewood, I'm sure, is in Columbus too. Them and their sister company are all over everything. There's no way I can get away from them. I mean, I even had a job interview once, but then I realized that I was like, no, there's no way. I had to tell him I have to excuse myself from this. I didn't realize you were doing something that had to do with Applewood. You're a recruiter for Applewood. So, not that I have any issue with them, but they do with me because of what happened. I'm persona non grata. The damage was accomplished the moment enough authority figures decided that association with me carried any sort of risk. I'm not a Demakia with a name I can lean back on. I'm not a Tim Williams who apparently can get the county to pay for lawyer after lawyer after lawyer. I'm not any of these people. As a certain podcaster / owner said, I'm nobody. I didn't hang with them out on the block. The decision was never formalized, but it didn't need to be about me ever. In a court adjacent and licensed professions, reputation functions as gatekeeping. When judges, police chiefs, or political officials frame someone as volatile or unsafe, that label migrates instantly into the risk calculations of agencies and employers. Doesn't matter whether the claim's proven, just matter if it exists. The email record I have, you have, we all have now shows exactly how that contamination occurred. I can clearly see, and you can clearly see, a police chief repeatedly validating catastrophic claims without evidence, discouraging regulatory due process, and openly predicting that I would eventually harm someone, which carries on today in podcasts and people saying that I would harm government buildings and shit. Give me a break. I'm never going to hurt anybody, ever. You couldn't even force me to do it. Aaron, if you take this weapon and you off this person, it'll save the life of your kid. Sorry, I love my kid too much to do that to her. I don't want her to live with the rest of her life with the guilt of thinking that no, it's not fair. Can't judge life on that. All life is valuable. All humanity is valuable. I'm a social worker. I don't care what you think. I don't believe in taking life. I believe in uplifting it. The fact of the matter is that none of you can see that. The people that are close to me see it, and they see the way I have to go about it. But in the grand scheme of things, like, whatever. When you see a chief of police validating catastrophic claims without evidence, then what? You can see these statements being shared with licensing bodies and third parties, not as allegations to be investigated, but as foregone conclusions. They're facts. You can see where they substitution of fear for fact, right? Urgency for proof. Once it happens, professional consequences are automatic. Employers do not ask whether a complaint was retaliatory. They ask whether hiring you will bring scrutiny. Courts do not ask whether you were cleared. Otherwise, I'd have a job at the courts right now. They need me. The jail needs me. I applied for jobs and they didn't call me back because I wanted to test and see if they would. I'm highly qualified for the jobs they're offering, but they're not going to in Lorraine County. And that proves right there that even though they said that I was not terminated, that they just separated contract with me and yada, 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 and I was rehireable, all these other things, they're not going to ever bring me back into the fold. That would have been the quickest and easiest way they could have reincorporated me after I won my social work board. They should have just said really quickly, hey, let's scoop this guy up and do a petticoat on him. Let's give him a job, something, easy that makes him happy and keeps him paid so he shuts the fuck up. No, instead what they did was they offered me a payout. And the worst thing about the Applewood payout, I still have it, is these motherfuckers offered me 1 month's salary. Fuck off. Like, it took me another 6 months just to find a fucking job. I had to go on unemployment, and you threatened to take that away. All because what? Some roly-poly fucking Coast Guard chief of police decided that I wasn't worthy of fucking being a social worker? Give me a break. Whatever. Hey, the purpose was not adjudication. It was just a warning. That's what makes this especially damning in light of the full record, that none of it correlates to performance. There's no documented decline in my competence, no sustained ethical violations, no finding of harm to any client or party. The only change was that I became inconvenient to James fucking McCann. And everybody knows you don't piss off James, or at least they did. I asked questions that required answers. I insisted that policy mean what it says. I documented when it did not. For that, the response was not rebuttal or correction. It was removal by suffocation. I mean, the simple fact that Joseph Levesque wanted to hide the police policy manual from me for so long, and I had to fight him for every section almost verbatim. And then 6 months later, he just posted online magically, and the city does like it's nobody's business. Really? All right. So the response isn't rebuttal or correction. It was just removal. So the judicial admission that I referenced is not just an outlier, it's a window. When someone in a position of authority casually acknowledges that my professional removal occurred because complaints were made to the courts, meaning Judge Glass about McCann, that man blames everyone else for his own problems but himself. Did you say that, Sherry? I mean, does that sound like something Aaron would say? That man blames everyone for his problems but himself. It kind of reminds me of my 7th grade English teacher. She's very articulate, a very wonderful person by all accounts. I know some people I know, and I know some of the cases that she's tried on people don't trust certain judgments that were made, but by all accounts, everything I've seen about Sherry Glass has always been nice. She's always been pleasant to me, even after this stuff. She came up to me and talked to me inside the hall. I don't have anything super negative to say about her, other than some of her handling of some of her cases. But we see that in a lot of areas. We can see people that we're upset with for maybe they didn't follow through on what they should have done, but we can still like them as people. We can still think they're great humans, and she is. She's a she's a family woman. She has a child. Her child deserves to be, given the same respect my child and everyone else's child does. And I would never speak ill of her as a person. But as a judge, when you speak to a social worker as a social worker outside of a social work thing, and we're talking about a chief of police taking someone's job, it kind of concerns me, especially considering we used to talk about, small talk. And then you let some guy that we never saw in our small talk circles just shit on that. But okay, you weren't alone. I get it wasn't just you. It was peer pressure. All the judges did it, right? Well, Sherry, if one judge is doing it, are you going to do it? Just because Janet jumped in the river doesn't mean you have to. And listen, just because Swinsky goes out there and listens to people that are trying to hypnotize her doesn't mean you have to. Hey, and just because Dezort grants decision after decision on behalf of TH doesn't mean you should. The judicial admission is a window. A position of authority casually acknowledges that my professional removal occurred because complaints were made to the courts. It confirms what the broader pattern already proves. This was not protective action. It was punitive. It was not about safety. It was about silencing me. And here's the part that makes this tactic so effective and dangerous is that no due process for reputational punishment, right? You can't appeal conversations. You can't appeal, what you're not allowed to hear. You cannot cross-examine warnings delivered by phone or email. You cannot defend yourself against labels circulated and informally between institutions that never acknowledged they received them. I mean, hell, if I hadn't requested all these emails, I would have never known. And that's why it makes them holding back Mary Springowski's emails for months and months and months. Tells me that what she wrote about me is so god-awful that there's zero chance they can let me have it. That's it. It has to be so god-awful that they're scared to death once I get it, that I will use it as the final chopping block against this whole government. Let's not even fail to mention the fact that I have 13 individual requests out for the law department's emails they don't want to give me either. But they've seemed more stuck on not giving me the Springowski emails than anything else. And even with the Tia Springowski emails that I asked about, they gave me one email, yet I know there are more that exist because I've seen her name, Springowski's name, show up in other email chains and other things that involve Tia. So I know that's a lie. They didn't give me everything. But you can't appeal these things. They're in control. They want you to know that. The system relies on that asymmetry. It relies on the fact that the reputational harm does not require any evidence. It does not generate accountability. On paper, everyone remains clean, right? Everyone's good. No one ordered a retaliation. Whoa! Did you order the code red? You're goddamn right I did. Oh, the defendant has rights. I move for an immediate Article 41 hearing. Or was it 31? Listen, no official email says do not hire Aaron. Every actor can point to caution, discretion, professionalism. It's an at-will employer. And yet the outcome is still identical to the formal termination. The work disappears. It dries up like a pond in a desert. Standing evaporates, just like the city tries to claim your citizenship does when you challenge their laws. The career trajectory is permanently altered. You go from being an up-and-coming social worker with a great history with all these licensures, degrees, and all this background behind you, and a disabled veteran, to being the guy that they should be celebrating, hiring, celebrating, putting to the front, the guy that's out there, they should be writing fucking articles about my bitch ass, coming back off disability, coming back off being permanently disabled, to become an actual person that contributes to society, only to have a chief of police who's physically able to handle his own shit, demean, belittle, and trash me, have an entire society demean, belittle, and trash me, all while you motherfuckers go out and build veterans memorials and talk shit about a disabled veteran who soon will be 100% disabled again and back on a veteran's pension, all because your chief of police and every last one of you thinks it's okay to beat the fuck out of me because you don't like what I had to say. I digress, right? Hey, but you respect veterans, right? You guys are pro-veteran. You got TH, you got Tuck, you got everybody out there talking about my veteran status, and it's not real. Look, motherfuckers, it's right fucking there. The fuck? I broadcast this shit for you every fucking time. Over there's an award I got. There's the fucking, the discharge. There's my college degree. There's my college degree. And there's a couple of licensures. Oh, and don't forget that right there. Wait, right there. Look at that. You see that? You see that? You see it. I know you see it. And I see it. You saw it. But that was all taken. And it wasn't just simply income. This is credibility. I still have the license. I should be able to get a job anywhere. I did this. I did years of work in college to get the license, to pass the test. The presumption of ethical fitness that every licensed professional relies on until proven otherwise. Once that presumption is stripped away through installation or through, rather than adjudication, it doesn't return because the allegations fail. It's why this mechanism is deployed so often and acknowledged so rarely. The people who use it understand they do not have to win. James never had to win. All he had to do was contaminate. The system will finish the job and flush you out. I mean, probation should say they're going to disappear you. Lorraine PD. So juvenile probation thought that Lorraine PD was going to disappear me. And they thought so enough that they kept saying it as a joke more often than not. And I was in their goddamn Christmas photo. I do miss Ryan. I liked him. Ryan, if you're ever out there and you ever want to shoot me a message, I do miss you, bro. But I did tell you what was going to happen. I told you eventually both McCann and I were both going to be unemployed. Wasn't that right? But you have to ask what the real harm was. The answer is now fully documented. The harm was not emotional. It was structural. It was economic. It was professional. A career grounded in advocacy, compliance, and documented accountability was deliberately destabilized through channels designed to appear neutral while producing a specific, predictable result. That's the point where the readers and the listeners and everyone needs to stop thinking about me and start thinking about the architecture behind it. Because it can be done to someone who documents everything, understands the law, follows policy, and refuses to disappear quietly. Then the issue is not whether I survived it. The issue is how many people never do. It's not collateral damage. It's the design. With that, it brings us to section 5, our next section here. Where are we at? Jesus, this is going to be a long one tonight, folks. Give me one more second. We're going to do a quick pause for station identification, and then we'll be right back. Let's see which one we're going to do now.
Here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp, we like to thank our sponsors. We have a few unofficial sponsors tonight, and they are definitely not paid sponsorships. I want to throw out there a big thank you to Joseph Jones and Eric Jones of the Lorraine Daily and the Vermilion Daily. They have a local news page. You should check them out. They do plenty of great work broadcasting all the news that is the news that you want to have in Lorraine and Lorraine County. So check them out. Also, please, if you need any legal services, feel free to reach out to Robert Gargas. You can find him listed online. He's a fine attorney
And it comes highly recommended by yours truly. And last but not least, I want to mention D&C Radio. Please make sure you check out one of the up-and-coming internet hip-hop stations and all of their shows. They put on a lot of shows. You have the Never Outdone show. You also have the Eric Bowen show, Speak Up, Speak Out. So please make sure you guys check them out as well if you're looking for your latest and up-to-date hip-hop artistry. All right. Our next section is Section 5, protection for the complaint, abandonment for the inconvenient, and what follows the career kill shot is not silence alone, it's inversion. Got to turn it around, folks. The same institutions that always move instantly and aggressively and without skepticism when it comes to accusations that were made against me, because suddenly paralyzed when the accusations collapse under their own weight, right? The moment the narrative stopped serving power, the system stopped functioning. That's where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. It's not just with me. I want to point out that it happens with me, James, Garen, anyone. Look, there's more than us. James, Aaron, and Garen, or maybe even Robert, were names that pop up big numbers, right? Names like Hilton and Lorraine Ritchie and all these other names were all sparks, right? Even Aiden Fogels, John Morose, all of us that kind of skirt this edge of the public hemisphere, of public sphere, of advising people in the public. And believe it or not, whether all of those people want to realize they do or they don't, we all hold our own roles in that. And we all hold our own responsibilities for the truths and mistruths that we may or may not sell. There have been times where I broadcast at a power base that was 1,000% sure I was against, a certain prosecutor. And again, I still don't justify everything that he did, but I also understand how things happen. I understand now how Lorraine works. Did I come at this whole process initially with an idealistic idea that probably should have not been my point of focus? Yeah. I believed, like NPR and social work said, that if you did the right thing, that people would just be like, all right. So imagine Ralphie, and we're at Christmas time. Imagine Ralphie at Christmas Story, right? When he turned in his little Red Ryder BB gun story to the teacher, and he's up front, and he's like, right? Like, in your mind, you picture it playing out completely different. In my mind, I was going to be the guy that came in and corrected all these problems, and like, oh my God, Aaron, he's so great! Woo! Instead, they were like, soap poisoning for you, bitch. And that's where the contrast gets impossible to ignore, right? The complaints were made about me. Law enforcement didn't fucking hesitate when it was being made about me with Tia and those criminal complaints that originated supposedly from people who didn't say anything, at least. And they said in police reports they did say things, and then later said they didn't say things, even though they passed things on to other people. And even though those people said they didn't share those things with other people, who passed those things on to other people, and those people shared with other people. When emails arrived portraying me as unstable, dangerous, and spiraling, they were treated as credible without verification, right? There's still no proof. When they contacted my licensing bodies, the tone wasn't neutral. It wasn't investigatory. It was predictive. Harm was assumed before facts were gathered. Catastrophe was forecast as if it were inevitable, like I was the hurricane coming to wipe out the Keys. The presumption was guilt. The posture was urgency. And those same allegations were examined and failed. But when hearsay collapsed into nothing more than rumor stacked on rumor, when an internal legal review acknowledged that no prosecutable conduct existed, the system did not correct itself. It withdrew. The refusal to act did not look like justice delayed. It looked like justice denied by design. The written determination declining charges is especially revealing because it's not extraordinary. It's because it's ordinary. It acknowledges what was true and was always true. The alleged statements were reported weeks later. They passed through multiple layers of hearsay. They were not direct threats. They were accompanied by no action, and they were not corroborated. That's what it said. They were not admissible, and therefore, under basic evidentiary standards, they could not support criminal charges. That conclusion should have triggered accountability. Instead, it triggered disengagement. No one followed up to address the damage already done. No one corrected the record with the same energy that they used to spread it. No one contacted the licensing board to say that the claims were unfounded. No one reached out to employers, courts, or agencies to say they quietly warned things away. The system treated the findings as no case, not as a resolution, but as an inconvenience. It's asymmetry that defines this whole experience. Allegations travel fast and wide. Exoneration goes nowhere. For the record, somebody that emailed me recently about McCann being exonerated. First off, you can't exonerate somebody that's never been charged. Secondly, I have no doubt that he'll be exonerated by anyone in Lorain County, because any investigation done in Lorain City, Lorain County on McCann or any other Lorain official is automatically suspect at its best. I would say anyone from Ottawa County is suspect at its best, because that's who Tony Sillo and the AG want. I would say go to Columbus. If I want an investigator, I want my investigator to be from Columbus, because I trust Franklin County more than I do Lorain County or Ottawa County, or even Cuyahoga County. Why would I trust any of these people? Well, I don't have a reason to. I'm not a normie when it comes to Lorain. I haven't lived all my life. So when I look around at the people that will and will not do stuff for me, I see who won't. I see that justice in Lorain is defined on who you blow, not who you know. I mean, wait, who you know, not who you blow. Wait, whatever. Allegations travel fast and wide. The role of the sheriff's office, though, and that of the prosecutor's office in this phase is not to be defined by what they did, but what they didn't do, right? Jack Hall, my buddy, my pal, my buddy and me. Hello, folks. I'm Sheriff Jack Hall. That's right, folks. Jack Hall here. And I just want you guys to know that if you support me in the election, I will definitely fuck you. If you go out and do things on my behalf, I will definitely fuck you. If you go out and request things for me and advise me on my websites and advise me on my campaign and do everything for me and worship me like a little bit of a gray-haired God that was a fucking Jesus incarnate, I will fuck you. That's right, folks. My name is Jack Hall, and I will fuck you. But just want you guys to know that drive safe. Any photo opportunities I'm out there for. And make sure you understand one thing. Like, come on, guy. Here's my cream puff. Oh, yeah. All I know is this, guys, is that, hey, as your sheriff, I will continue to ask you for more and more money to support my major plans. And my major plans are to hire more majors to be a major pain in your ass. Oh, and I'm not going to do shit for anybody that's legal. I'm going to hide records from you. I'm not going to do anything transparent. I'm going to hide the Coonrad records. When you're my buddy, I'm going to let you get shit, but then when you're not, I'm not. And then I'm going to apparently have some deal with Tia that makes her so angry that she turns on me and says, I'm disappointed in you, like he was somehow in her corner all along, even though she was accusing him of being a mine and being bought out. And again, how do I have all this money? How does Aaron have all this money, damn it? He's out here doing shit. He's got money to pay off a hitman and me? Jesus, he must be rich. I'm not. Fucking jackass. I love that fucking cardboard thing. That was the best thing. I'm sorry. Like, look. Tell me that's not the best thing ever. Come on, guy. Here's my cream puff. I am. Put on the fucking devil sign. Be like the goddamn fucking South Park and shit. This fucking shit right here. I mean, like, come on, guy. Come on, guy. Here's my cream puff. Like, I mean, that was probably the best and worst idea his campaign manager ever came up with. I'm glad I picked that up off the ground. Somebody else threw it on the ground. They only gave those out to certain people, and then someone threw it on the ground. But, you know, the obligation that they had, like, the role the sheriff's office had and the prosecutor's office had in this phase is not defined by what they did, but what they didn't do, right? Once it became clear that the accusations could not be substantiated, the obligation shifted from enforcement to repair. The obligation was ignored. request for investigation into the false reporting into what they did, coordinated harassment into what they did while it was an election season, misuse of official contracts and channels were met with dismissal. The posture was no longer urgency. It was exhaustion. The message was implicit but not unmistakable. This was not worth our time. You're not worth our time, Aaron. Why? Well, because you asked questions about the sheriff and the lunch bunch and forced the sheriff's wife to show her credit card receipts to you through Nietzsche to prove that you paid for a vacation. Well, how would you need to show that to me? Ask yourself that. Why would the sheriff's lawyer decide that it was important to share with Aaron Knapp the receipts of the sheriff's wife's credit cards to prove they paid for the trip that Mike Buklovich and crew didn't? I don't care if he did or he didn't. I know it's legal, not legal, right? But that's not my concern. I was more upset that they were on the vacation because people were asking me that question. That question was coming up like the second Jack was in Florida. Dave Moore flew down and got his photo up, right? And I had warned Jack. I knew. I mean, all right. So imagine being Rocky Balboa in that shitty Rocky movie, right? I think it was Rocky 5 with Clubber Lane or whatever, where he was a fucking beat down has-been who couldn't fight anymore, and then suddenly, like, he's out there in the street beating the shit out of Clubber Lane. Well, imagine being Rocky and you take in Rock. I mean, you're the guy that takes in, Clubber, or not Clubber. It wasn't Clubber Lane. It was that white dude, Johnny. Anyway, the movie was so sucky. I don't remember the guy's name. So he goes out there and he takes this guy and he brings him into his house. His own kid feels bad, does all these things right. He gives up everything for an entire year for this guy. And then the guy leaves him for somebody else. Now, I never expected Jack to be my boy, ever. I never wanted that. In fact, I explicitly told Jack, I want to be a little bit at odds with you because I can't be objective otherwise. That being said, I think you're exactly what Lorain County needs. And I was apparently wrong. He was exactly what he made himself present to me as exactly what Lorain County needed. And now I get the idea of he's an insurance salesman. I mean, come on, you want me to believe that picture the other day of him, like, in the supposed, someone pulled out in front of me and I just walked up and gave him a warning and someone happened to be there to take a picture of me. Give me a fucking break. You pause for more fucking station identification than anybody I've ever met in my life. And that's saying a lot coming from me. But this motherfucker acted like he was better than and turned out to be worse than. I mean, I still honestly don't think Rich would have done better. I can't say he would have. But again, when you're floating two turds in the same toilet bowl, the only thing you can do is flush them. How about we get somebody of some quality up there in those positions? And every time I start to think I found somebody of quality within law enforcement, I start to question myself. Because again, all of them are eventually contaminated somewhat by the culture that they live in. We can't help but be. It's like military. You can't help but dislike the people you're trained to combat. Like, if you're a loss prevention agent, how can you help but dislike thieves and think people are thieves? Like, you start to look at these scenarios as not what ifs or possibilities, but as factual outcomes. If you're in the government and you see a citizenry group as your enemy, then suddenly they become that. Posture is no longer urgency. It's exhaustion. Just wait them out. The message was implicit but unmistakable. It's not worth our time at the sheriff's office. And, let's not even talk about the fact they did nothing about the assault. Everybody encouraged me to report that assault at the madhouse. I wasn't going to say that. I'm sorry. Apologize. Everybody encouraged me to report the assault that occurred because certain patrons at a certain bar were aggressive to me. But I didn't want to because I knew it was going to happen. And I did. And we see what happened. Nothing. And that's not on the establishment. That's on the government. This isn't about the establishment. I don't give a fuck about that right now. I'm talking about the government's response to what the establishment provided them. Like, according to the report, the establishment cooperated 1,000% with the police, the sheriff, right? So if the establishment provided all the video, if the establishment provided all the documentation, if the establishment showed that, hey, look, here's this guy, he didn't want to leave, this happened, but this customer did this, this, and this, and this customer did this, this, and this, and this customer did this, this, and this, and we weren't responsible. That'd have been one thing. He provided the video. The sheriff looked at that and went, here's the video of this guy having this stuff happen to him. We're going to send it to the Elyria prosecutor. I'm assuming that was Amanda Deary. And they just said no. I get it. Nobody wants to prosecute that, but it doesn't really matter. That's the message that was sent back, is that access to justice is conditional. Like was once said to me on my front porch by Mr. Curran, it's not the ask, it's the asker. Let that sink in. It's not what you're asking, it's who's asking. And that flips, because on that statement I say, well, it's not the ask, it's the asker. So they look at that and they go, hey, Aaron, we're not going to give him this, this, and this. But hey, guess what? When it comes to records, they do now. It's not the ask, it's the asker. So now when someone I know wants records, and I'm watching 2 or 3 of your guys' records requests through blind carbon copy, and I'll say one of you might actually be watching at some point. So when you do, just know when you're ready for me to step into those CC'd conversations that are BCC'd, you got to, outside the chain, let me know that's what you want me to do, because it usually causes problems. But it communicates that the access to justice will always be conditional in Lorain and Lorain County. It signals that whether the law is enforced depends on not the facts, but on whether law enforcement or enforcement itself would inconvenience people of influence or with influence, or whether it would benefit someone who they don't want to have any influence. It tells anyone paying attention that protection flows towards those aligned with the power, and abandonment awaits those who challenge it. You don't do what we want, guess what? You don't get shit. No justice, no nothing. Personal consequences of that posture is not abstract. They're lived. That's why when I got a message from that email the other day, Steph Grail, whatever, come on. It's either McCann or Tia or somebody, like, that profile's been around for a hot minute, and I don't really care. Like, I blocked it on Facebook, so it had to message me because everybody has my email address now, and they think it's okay just to email me. So they emailed me with that name, not on a private name, the actual Steph Grail name. And I was kind of shocked, but okay, I've always assumed, somebody always told me that was either McCann or Tia, and it may not be either of them. Whoever it is, it's a McCann support, and they're like, well, you know what? He's been exonerated, so go have yourself a fucking, fuck yourself in the new year. Whatever, dude. Fuck myself in the new year. Fuck myself in the last year. Fuck myself any day, right? At this point, what do I have? When law enforcement declines even to investigate demonstrably false claims after they caused them after they caused harm to you, it validates the tactic. It tells bad actors that there is no downside to lying. Hold on a second. It is pouring down out there, and I had my window cracked open. I had to crack it a little. It validates tech, tells bad actors there's no downside to lying, exaggerating, weaponizing fear. It reassures them that when the case collapses, that the damage will stand. The system will not unwind it, right? The system's not going to apologize. The system will not intervene on behalf of the person that was targeted. That's how the harassment becomes institutional. The experience of being publicly supported when it suited political narratives and being privately discarded when it did not is not incidental, structural. When my advocacy aligned with reform rhetoric and transparency talking points or convenient pressure against others, doors are open. When that same advocacy begins to implicate the institutions themselves, then the posture changes. The communication becomes curt. Responses become evasive. Engagement becomes transactional and then non-existent. The shift isn't subtle. It's instructive. It tells you what's happening. It's intended to go beyond the emails, the offices, and the daily life. When institutions signal, even quietly, that someone is unprotected, the signal is read by the public. It emboldens the confrontations that have been occurring. It normalizes the harassment that's occurred. I mean, it creates an environment where being accosted in public spaces feel permitted. The lack of institutional correction becomes social permission. That's where it's, it means to be. That's what it means to be labeled as inconvenient in Lorraine. Not dangerous, not guilty, just inconvenient. Inconvenient people are not prosecuted fairly or protected consistently. They are managed, isolated. They're allowed to absorb damage until they retreat or collapse. And if they complain, the complaint itself is framed as further evidence that they are the problem. The most corrosive act or aspect of this phase is not the refusal to act, it's the normalization of that refusal. Once you see how easily enforcement discretion becomes political discretion, it just becomes impossible to unsee. The law does not fail loudly here. It simply declines to show up or dies with a whimper. And the lesson that it teaches is that it's the same lesson the system teaches. It's not everyone gets justice. Not everyone gets protection. Not everyone gets to be believed. Those privileges are reserved for the people who do not disrupt the equilibrium of power. The rest are expected to endure it quietly. And when we get to our next section, that's where expectation collides with documentation and where the record stops being something that they can ignore. We get into That Man, which is Lorraine Ritchie, and how outside actors coordinated complaints when withheld emails explain like the whole career kill shot. Like this sidebar, it's a sidebar that's going to only exist because of all these things that occurred didn't occur in a vacuum. It was preceded, shaped, and sustained by a coordinated narrative. Campaign involving private citizens, elected officials, and law enforcement operating almost entirely outside the formal adjudicatory process. What follows is not opinion. It's drawn directly from emails, complaints, correspondence, and now they exist in the public record alongside conspicuous gaps where the records remain withheld or heavily redacted. The phrase that appears again and again, though, often without naming me directly, is that man. It's a rhetorical device that allows fear to circulate without accountability. It reduces a licensed professional, a parent, and a public records requester to a vague threat that can be referenced without evidence. That man. It is how rumor is laundered into institutional concern. And I think somebody that titles her blog, This Woman's Blog, or something like that. I mean, not surprising, but Lorraine Ritchie, you're going to be my next topic in this little saga here. We're going to take a quick pause on that to just open this window again, and I'll be right back. All right. Well, Lorraine Ritchie is one of the most persistent outside actors advancing this narrative. I didn't realize it until way late in the process. I didn't even know who she was. But in multiple emails sent directly to the police chief, the law director, the mayor, city council members, prosecutors, the media. And this was long before I ever addressed her, knew who she was. Even became George Patton. I was still Aaron Knapp then. Lorraine Ritchie messaged all these people about me and framed me not as a critic or an advocate, but as a danger requiring some sort of intervention. This British bitch is out there saying in one message that I need at least a welfare check and something has to be done. Asserting that my conduct constituted some sort of escalating behavior and threatening rhetoric, quote, end quote. She repeatedly described lawful activity as public records requests and litigation and political speech as evidence of instability. Sounds like McCann. In another email, she claimed that I had been trespassed in other government buildings due to erratic behavior in other states, despite providing no documentation, providing the corroboration. Perhaps most telling is her language, framing outside or the outcome rather than the evidence. She warned officials that this situation cannot be allowed to cause the targeted persons any more distress. And in fact, due to the lawsuit, thousands in legal fees to the taxpayers of Lorraine, talking about Guerin, effectively arguing that my advocacy and Guerin's advocacy in itself constituted some sort of harm or warning intervention because of what we were doing. These are not private concerns expressed quietly. They're broadcast into an official channels and treated as credible enough to circulate. Worse yet, we got Mary Springowski, counsel at large, and her communications mirror and reinforce that framing when you read it in Lorraine's. In an email sent to the police chief, the law director, and Lorain County prosecutor, Mary Springowski wrote this in an email, and a public email, and on a public server, two public servers, that she and her husband were concerned for her personal safety, and that somehow, that the conduct they had been receiving had crossed numerous lines of reasonable and rational behavior. She asserted that a cease and desist or a protection order may be necessary, not because of any direct threat, but because of what she described as fixation and escalation. At no point in these communications is there a citation of criminal charge, disciplinary finding, or judicial determination against me or Garen. What exists instead is repetition. Concern, layered on concern, fear echoed by authority. And this is where the withheld emails matter. Despite months of public records requests for Mary's emails about me, specifically seeking all her emails authored by or involving Springowski that reference me, talk about me, or bring me up, the city has refused to release anything to me. And then recently they've been saying they're going to send it to her and others to be redacted before sent to me. You shouldn't be sending any public-facing emails without that have personal information in them through unredacted channels. If they were redacted emails, I wouldn't be able to get them. If you send something through secure redacted process, then you'd have to. Political opinions, complaints, and advocacy communications do not contain personal identifying information that would justify redaction unless they reveal coordination or instruction. The absence of those emails is in itself is prohibitive or probative. Silence in the records request context is not neutral. It's an admission that the disclosure would explain too much. The role of law enforcement is where the sidebar stops being circumstantial and starts being dispositive. Chief McCann, or then Chief McCann, could not merely receive these outside communications, he amplified them. On June 1st of 23, he wrote, "It seems Mr. Knapp is becoming unhinged," followed by, quote, It looks to me like Mr. Knapp is becoming more aggressive and unpredictable. These statements were made while an investigation was supposedly ongoing and before any findings had been issued. So these are not conclusions drawn from adjudication. They were character judgments transmitted as fact by McCann. These judgments did not stay internal. McCann sent communications about me to licensing authorities, including the Ohio Counselor, Social Worker and Marriage and Family Therapist Board. In doing so, he weaponized the credibility of his office. Imagine a chief of police weaponizing the credibility of his office. I have absolute fucking proof of it. So he used all of this shit that wasn't true to try and attack me, and he still fucking failed. The board found me innocent, and they did nothing to him. He lied to a board, which is a crime, and they did nothing to him. But okay. But I'm a bad guy, I got you. Hey, that alone changes how a professional will be treated regardless of the outcome. The communications between McCann and when we look back to what he did, it wasn't just that. He had communications that were between him and Tia Hilton, the private citizen of Amherst, that showed this dynamic in its rawest of forms that I got most recently. Between Hilton and McCann, they were talking to each other. And Hilton accused me of being, quote, a drunk, giving out clients' first and last names, pretending, quote, to be an FBI agent, and posing as an imminent threat, stating she was reporting me before he goes postal and takes out the whole government and citizens. These are extraordinary allegations, folks, to a police chief. They're also false as fuck. Yet McCann's response did not caution her against escalation. Instead, he told her, I received so many calls about Knapp, so you violated your ethical oath, gave all this stuff out about ongoing shit to her. Okay, whatever. Growing more and more out of control. What, from Lorraine Ritchie? From Mary Springowski. So from Mary Springowski can write whatever the fuck she wants in an email to the chief, and it's okay. This bitch can go around talking shit about everybody she wants to, act like she's a fucking victim. Oh, while I have her own fucking emails where she's really just being a cunt. Yeah, I got you. And I hate that word. But I'm starting to feel like this bitch is being one. I wasn't even talking about you and my name was in your goddamn mouth. And you were talking to people about me at the police department. And now the chief's out there, I've received so many calls about Nap growing more and more out of control. Fuck you. You guys don't know me. And then he says to her, just don't expect this board to do anything. There's no accountability from that governmental body. You mean kind of like police when they investigate themselves, James? Go fuck off, bro. I literally imagine a chief of police mad at the social work board because they investigated the social worker and didn't find him guilty of what he wanted them to. So what would he say to a body of civilians that wanted a guilty resident out of a client? I mean, out of a police officer's incident, and he didn't get one. Oh, we investigated. So shut up. You're just going to have to wait until they said, he wrote to her. You're going to have to wait until he harms a client and then just sue the board and go public. Let's just hope no one dies in the process. This is a police chief. Let's hope no one dies in the process. This weeble wobble looking motherfucker. These words are not ambiguous. They validate a narrative of danger while acknowledging no current basis for action. They demonstrate an awareness that harm hadn't occurred while still reinforcing the same fear factor that McCann wanted to reinforce. And later, when Tia sought confirmation of a civil protection order, McCann instructed her that enforcement depended on leads and NCIS entries. He did not correct the record regarding the false allegations she had circulated. The damage had already been done. What ultimately exposes the entire structure is what happened when the allegations were actually reviewed. Lorraine County Sheriff's Office declined to recommend charges, explicitly stating that the alleged threat was delayed, layered with hearsay, and not a direct threat. The legal conclusion was clear: no charges should be filed. But by that point, the kill shot had already been landed. License plates existed. She was already going after my other license. Emails framing me as a danger existed. Law enforcement had communicated concern to third parties. Judges, officials felt comfortable speaking about me regularly as a problem. None of that was undone by clearance, by me being cleared. None of it was corrected. No corrective emails were sent. No retractions issued. Silence followed. The silence is not an oversight. It's policy by omission. And I only brought this sidebar up because it makes one thing unavoidable to you guys listening, is that the destruction of my career was not the result of misconduct. It was the result of coordination, repetition, and institutional risk and avoidance. Outside actors supplied the narrative. Officials circulated it. Law enforcement validated it. And when the allegations failed, no one cleaned up the wreckage. No one. And that's why the emails still matter. And that's why this redactions matter. And that's why the phrase, that man, as Lorraine liked to say, matters. Because this is what reputational assassination looks like when it's done carefully enough that no one has to sign their name by it. The absurdity of all of that is the evidence. And I crack up because, Lorraine will sit here and act better than thou. But this bitch was out there talking shit about me for like a good 6 months to a year before I even knew who she was. The gall, the nerve. But I imagine who she was sent by. Because what ultimately exposed the unreality of this entire episode is not just what was said, but who it was said about. The emails, the warnings, the escalations, and whispered alarms were not about, armed extremists, a fugitive, or someone operating outside professional oversight. They were about me, a licensed social worker, a person whose entire career existed inside regulated systems, background checks, continuing educational requirements, ethical codes, and mandating reporting obligations. That context matters because none of the language used by James McCann, Tia Hilton, Lorraine Ritchie aligns with the reality of what an LSW actually is. Most people don't know. To hold a social work license in Ohio requires a criminal background check, fingerprinting, degree verification, supervised practice, and ongoing compliance with state and national ethical standards. The whole profession is built on risk assessment and de-escalation, documentation, and accountability. It's not compatible with secrecy, impulsive violence, or unchecked conduct. And yet, through repetition and fear-based framing, I'm recast as something else entirely, a threat, a destabilizing force, someone to be watched, warned about, and quietly excluded. Not because I hadn't done anything wrong, but because enough people decided to talk about me as if I had. And the truly disturbing fact is at the end of the sidebar is that multiple elected officials, private citizens, and senior law enforcement figures spent months circulating these emails, expressing alarm and escalating narratives about a licensed professional who was, in reality, doing exactly what social workers are trained to do: asking questions, documenting systems, advocating for lawful process, insisting that policy actually be followed. No drugs, no weapons, no criminal charges, no disciplinary findings, no victims, just emails, just fear, just a profession turned inside out by people who understood that you do not have to prove someone to be dangerous if you can make enough authority figures feel uncomfortable. In the end, the contrast is the point. A system that claims to value ethics and public safety allowed rumor to outweigh credentials, insinuation to outweigh clearance, and coordination anxiety to outweigh reality. That's not what failure is. That's not a failure of judgment, folks. That's a failure. And that's how reputational harm is manufactured. You know, and then in the end, you get ethically cleared and you're still targeted. Because after all the emails, after all the insinuations, after all of the concerned conversations that were treated rumor as evidence and repetition as validity, and one process that actually mattered reached a conclusion, I was reviewed, I was examined, I was evaluated, and under the only standards that have legal and professional authority over my license, I was deemed ethical. Let that sink in. It's not rhetorical. It's not interpretive. It's not my fucking opinion. It's the outcome of the very system these actors repeatedly invoked as a threat. The Ohio Counselor, Social Worker, and Marriage and Family Therapist Board did not stain the allegations made against me. There was no finding of misconduct, no determination that I posed a risk to clients, no conclusion that I violated professional boundaries, confidentiality, or standards of care, and the process worked explicitly and exactly as it was designed to work when the accusations are not supported by evidence and yet nothing stopped. I mean, when McCann was talking about all that stuff with Tia, this was months, almost a year after the Board of Social Work had decided against me. Tia went after my CDCA as a secondary attack. That's the most damning part of the entire record. The moment the ethical process resolved the question, the narrative should have ended. But yet Tia and McCann still carried it on as if it were true. Instead of accepting the outcome as they should have, the same people who complained to be concerned for public safety continue to speak right and behave as if findings never happened. That's a lie. It's bullshit. The clearance was never treated as irrelevant. The ethical determination was ignored. The result exposing the truth that had been hiding in plain sight from the beginning. This was never about ethics. It was about control. Licensed social workers are not casual actors. I'm not here to fucking do dumb shit for no reason. We're subject to statutory educational requirements, supervised practice, criminal background checks, continuing education, mandatory reporting obligations, and formal discipline when we fail to meet the standard. Our licenses are not symbolic. They are precisely, and they exist precisely because the state recognizes the gravity of the work that they're asking us to do and the risk of the abuse if oversight is lax. That is why ethical complaints are taken seriously, and that is why they require fucking proof. What happened here was inverted that logic. Allegations are treated as facts before review. Languages like out of control, unhinged, and dangerous were circulated freely, not in the findings, but in emails. Officials like James spoke as though in ethical authority belonged to them personally, not the board charged with enforcing it, right? Not the people with master level clinicians. Like he told Tia that multiple master level clinicians who had years and years in my profession were incorrect and worthless basically when they decided that I wasn't unethical. And when the board did not confirm that narrative, they didn't correct course, right? They doubled down. That's where the system harm or the harm to the system becomes systematic. Ethical clearance is supposed to restore the presumption of professional legitimacy. Once it said I was not guilty, it should have just been like it never happened. Instead, in my case, it became meaningless. They were like, well, whatever, because reputational damage had already been institutionalized. And the employees and the employers had already fired me. They didn't ask if the board decided. My job waited, kept me unpaid for months. 2 months, I think it was 3 almost. And then when the board found me ethical, they came back and said, all right, well, we'll offer you a month's salary if you sign this non-disclosure agreement. Fuck off. And then I was barred from any sort of meaningful work since then. Yeah, I mean, look, the president of the Mars board congratulated me on the homeless law I wrote for the city, but you know, I don't think he'll ever reach out and offer me a job because I'm toxic. They don't care what the board decided. They asked whether my name had been complicated. They asked whether the association would bring scrutiny. They ask whether keeping distance is easier than confronting the truth. The people who feel this know exactly how this worked. They didn't need ethics complaints to succeed. They only needed to exist long enough to contaminate the perception. And once that contamination spread through law enforcement emails, judicial complaints, and political correspondence, the formal outcomes ceased to matter. It didn't really fucking matter. The stain was already applied. Out damn spot. That's why repeated references to ethics and communications are so revealing. Ethics are not treated as process with an outcome. They're treated as a weapon that can be pointed indefinitely. Even after the oversight body declined to validate the claims, the language does not change. The warnings continued, the fear narratives persisted, the implication that I was the threat remained intact despite the absence of any substantial conduct, or misconduct for that matter. It's not accountability, folks. This is retaliation without the mask of concern. And this is where the story becomes larger than me. Because if it's a licensed social worker, somebody with the state who's supposed to be backed by the state and the state licensing boards, who should have been protected by his own board and by his own, everybody, is cleared, but he still gets treated as the guilt is permanent, then the ethical system is not the real gatekeeper of professional legitimacy. Informal powers. Whisper networks are. Unchecked coordination between outside actors and officials become more influential than evidence or findings. So imagine if ethics become theater useful only when it serves those already in control. The irony is brutal, because that means the very people who have accused me of being unsafe abandon the only mechanism designed to determine safety. They undermine the board's authority by ignoring its conclusions. They continue to speak as if they were qualified to diagnose, predict harm, and declare risk without credentials, without process, and without accountability. It's not protecting the public. That's bypassing safeguards to silence an inconvenient professional. So when I say I continue to speak because it's the ethical thing to do, I mean that literally. My obligation did not end because I was cleared, right? It intensified because the lesson in this case is not that ethics, this system has failed. It's that powerful people tried to replace it with their own narrative and were willing to ignore the outcome when it didn't serve them. Ethics did its job. The system did not. That distinction matters more than anything else in the story when you think about it. Because I look at it from a standpoint of this. You guys fucked with me and lost. And then when it came back to having to be accountable to that, you weren't. So again, imagine, as McCann always said, it's false. It's a law. You break the law when you make a false police report against a police officer. Same thing when you make a false complaint against a licensed social worker. You know that, right? But hey, you do you, boo. What I learned from this was that OSU, an established social work degree portal, lied. And I'm pretty sure every other social work program in the United States lies. When they tell you that you'll be protected if you do the right thing and come out and do the right thing every time and follow the rules and follow the laws like you're supposed to. In reality, what they're really saying is, we tell you to do that, but do it at your own peril. If I'm a social worker, if I'm a helping professional, I wouldn't do it anymore. If you ask me again to stand up and do it, if I could do it all over again, maybe I should just keep my head and mouth shut. My head down, my mouth shut, and never call anything out wrong, because what's the point? You guys are just going to fuck us anyway, right? But, when clearance is ignored, power decides anyway. That's why the record stopped being about individual misconduct and becomes about indictment of how informal power overrides formal process. Because once the question was answered, the only body with statutory authority over my license declined to sustain allegations. The responsible action would have been to just show restraint. Silence, shut the fuck up. Correction would have been appropriate. Acknowledgement, even privately. Handshake, apology, that would have been appropriate. None of that happened. Can't ever reached out. Nobody ever apologized. No one said sorry. Instead, the same narrative continued to circulate, untethered from outcome. Evidence or jurisdiction. People allowed it to continue on podcasts galore. They've told the same lie, the same story over and over and over again. That continuation matters more than the original accusations because anyone can file a complaint. Anyone can claim a concern. That's what separates good faith from abuse. It's what happens when facts are known. In this case, the facts were known and they were dis-fucking-regarded. The ethical process did not fail, was intentionally bypassed once it stopped being useful. And this is where the concept of accountability breaks down in the modern institutional setting. Officially, no one's responsible for the downstream effects of what they say in the emails, phone calls, or side conversations. There's always a distance. There's always a deniability. People speak of off the record while knowing full well that the consequences are very much on the fucking record for the person being discussed. The system allows for asymmetry to persist because it protects the speakers, not the subject. What is striking about in this record is how confidently non-experts spoke as if they had diagnostic authority. James and others were like making statements like out of control, concerning, dangerous, unhinged, appear repeatedly throughout this whole process, not in the clinical assessments, but in sworn or even in sworn findings, but in political and law enforcement correspondence. They weren't used accidentally or chosen that way. They were loaded precisely because the trigger institutional reflexes are what they wanted. They invite exclusion. They justify caution. They rationalize distance. And once those words were in circulation, they didn't need to be proven. They only needed to be repeated. That's how clearance becomes irrelevant. Not because the clearance lacked force, but because the audience already been conditioned to treat the subject as a liability. It didn't matter whether you were cleared or not. You're already bad news. It didn't matter if we proved that salt wasn't the enemy. It's the enemy. Ethics become background noise, drowned out by narrative momentum. The system does not stop and reconcile the contradiction. It simply moves on, carrying the damage forward. Who gives a fuck, right? And this part's not unique to me. It's the part that's most unsettling. If ethical clearance does not restore professional standing, the ethics oversight has been functionally subordinated to political convenience. If informal coordination becomes outside actors and officials can continue unchecked after allegations fail, then the process exists only as a procedural shield, not as a safeguard. If it creates the appearance of fairness while allowing outcomes to be decided elsewhere, and this is where people misunderstand the harm, right? The damage is not limited to reputation. It's not limited to lost work. It's not limited to stress or stigma. The real harm is when rules stop meaning what they say. When ethical systems can be invoked but ignored. When professionals learn a dangerous lesson. Compliance does not protect you. Documentation does not protect you. Clearance does not protect you. Silence becomes the only real defense. That lesson corrodes the entire field. In social work, the ethical framework is supposed to encourage advocacy, transparency, and accountability. It's supposed to protect practitioners who raise concerns in good faith. When those same mechanisms are weaponized to punish someone who refuses to disappear quietly, the message is to everyone else is the unmistakable. Do not push. Do not document. Do not force policy to matter. The cost will be paid privately, and no one will admit why. That's why the story cannot end with, I was cleared. And I can't just let it go because clearance isn't the conclusion. It's a pivot point. It exposes the difference between stated values and operational reality. It shows that the system was never waiting for an answer. It had already decided who was inconvenient. And once that decision was made, everything else, it's just theater. Emails continue, warnings circulate, concerns expressed without evidence, authority is implied without justification, and all of it operates in a gray space where no one single act is ever actionable, right? But the cumulative effect is devastating. Careers stall, access disappears, standing erodes, and the people responsible can always say they were just being cautious. Careful about what is the question no one answers, right? Because There was no risk identified by the ethics board, right? No finding of harm. There was no substantiated threat. The only thing that remained was discomfort to my words, discomfort with my scrutiny, discomfort with my documentation, discomfort with someone who would not accept informal power as a substitute for lawful process. It's not ethics, folks. That's enforcement of hierarchy and maybe even a little bit of feelings. A whole lot of bullshit. So when I ask, and when this section asks, like the whole, like what comes next, the answer is not reconciliation or closure. The answer is exposure. Systems that rely on silence to function cannot survive the sustained daylight. As I always say, sunlight's painful to somebody. Informal power depends on people believing that they're alone, isolated, and uniquely problematic. The record shows otherwise. The pattern's consistent, the behavior is coordinated, and the outcomes are predictable. Not the only one they've done this to. And that means that it's no longer about me defending myself. It's about documenting how easily ethical language can be stripped away and take away the meaning when the wrong person uses it incorrectly. You know, this particular cruelty about this whole thing is being rendered unemployable inside a profession that the state of Ohio itself acknowledges as critically understaffed. Social work in Ohio is not a saturated field, right? It's a shortage field by every measurable standard. Counties advertise vacancies continuously. Courts rely on contract clinicians to function. Child welfare agencies struggle to meet statutory obligations. Mental health providers warn publicly that demand far exceeds capacity. Here I am, fully fucking licensed, cleared, experienced, and professionally radioactive. The contradiction is not accidental, it's structural. I remain licensed in good standing. There are no restrictions on my credential. There are no consent agreements. Consent agreements basically where you'll consent to certain things while you're basically it's a bad thing. You don't have any consent agreements is good. There are no findings of misconduct against me. There is nothing in my license that prevent my employment, contracting, or court appointment. On paper, I'm exactly what Ohio needs more of. In practice, I'm locked out. And the reason has nothing to do with clinical competence or ethical fitness. It has everything to do with gatekeeping power. And in large portions of Ohio, especially Northeast Ohio, access to social work employment is not distributed evenly across independent agencies. It's consolidated. One of the most significant actors in that area and space is Applewood Centers and their sister company, an organization that holds contracts across multiple counties and operates deeply inside the juvenile justice courts, child welfare systems, community-based services. Applewood does not simply employ social workers. It functions as an infrastructure hub. If you get excluded there, you're excluded from pretty much the entire regional ecosystem. That's me. It's not speculation. It's how modern public service contracting works. When a single provider holds most of the kind of contracts, employment becomes less about qualifications and more about clearance. Not a licensure clearance, a reputational clearance, comfort clearance, political clearance, the kind of clearance that is never documented and never appealable, the kind that turns on whether hiring you would create friction for someone else. That's how a licensed professional becomes untouchable without ever being disciplined. From the outside, it looks impossible, right? How can someone be unemployable in a shortage profession? How can I still be sitting here and not working? How can agencies complain about caseloads while declining qualified workers? The answer is that the system doesn't prioritize service delivery the way it claims. It prioritizes risk avoidance and institutional harmony. A worker who raises questions, documents irregularities, or forces policy compliance is seen as a threat to smooth operations, even when they're right, especially when they're right. A once informal concern narratives attached to the name, and agencies do not evaluate them. They just route around them. Hiring managers do not say no explicitly delay. They say they went another direction. They say funding shifted. The position is no longer available. We decided to go in a different direction. They say that position was restructured. They say because no formal exclusion exists, there's nothing to challenge. And this how silence replaces due process. What makes this especially perverse is that the same agencies that will not hire someone like me continue to rely on the ethical standards of the profession publicly. They say that they believe in social work standards, right? They invoke social work values in language and in grant language. Applewood will say that they believe that they are following social work law. They invoke social work values and rights and they'll use our ethical code, but they're full of fucking shit. They cite trauma-informed care in press releases. They speak about accountability and advocacy as institutional commitments. But those values are tolerated only when they do not inconvenience the powers that be that pay them. Then they don't give a fuck. They don't care about you, your kids, or anybody. They care about the money. Because in their minds, well, if I'm a social worker and I have a job, I don't have a job. Fuck your job. The goal of a social worker is to be unemployed. The world should be perfect. The moment a social worker applies them upward instead of downward, the tolerance ends. Becoming unemployable under these conditions is not a reflection of my deficiency. It's evidence of enforcement. It shows how effectively informal blacklisting can operate without a single illegal act. And the entire judicial system, juvenile justice system, signed it. The judges of the juvenile justice system, Tim Weitzel, everyone in the juvenile justice system agreed with this decision to fuck Aaron Knapp. The judges' names are on the fucking record. Glass, Janik, Swinsky, they were all present during the decision that was made to exclude me because that man can't blame anyone for his problems but himself. Ain't that right, Sherry? But hey, I started applying my shit upward instead of downward, and y'all got mad. I wasn't forcing it down on the head of probation in my juvenile department. So like, why are you always disagreeing with us? Well, I'm not here to agree with you or disagree with you. I'm here to give my opinion as a medical professional, a licensed medical professional, not as whatever the fuck you think I was. But being unemployable under those conditions, it's not me, it's them. It shows how effectively informal blacklisting can operate without a single legal act. No one has to falsify a record. No one has to deny licensure. No one has to issue a formal ban. They just simply stop opening the fucking door. And because Applewood and similar entities sit at an intersection of the courts, counties, and services delivery, that closure ripples outward. Cleveland, Lorain County, juvenile court contracts. Fuck, I'm sure Applewood's down in Toledo. Community-based referrals. The same names appear. The same providers dominate. The same silence follows. That's what it means to be professionally erased while remaining legally intact. Still got it? Can't work. The state can say it needs social workers. Agencies can say they are hiring. Courts can say they want qualified practitioners. All that can be true at the same time. A specific person is quietly excluded for being inconvenient. The system is flexible enough to absorb the contradiction without acknowledging it. I applied for the retiring GAL guy's job. I would have been great at that. I have books on it. I have nothing but knowledge on GALs. I applied to the court so they could prove to me that they would never hire me. I didn't even get a call back, which proved to me that they have blacklisted me, which shows why what they've done is not true. Because they said, oh, well, you're good. But I'm not. Courts can say what they want about qualified practitioners. All of that can be true at the same time that a specific person is quietly excluded for being inconvenient. The system is flexible enough to absorb the contradiction without acknowledging it. And for the individual, the impact is devastating. My income disappeared, my career momentum collapsed, my skills stagnated, my professional identity eroded, and all that happens without accusation or resolution. All I was left was explaining to myself and eventually to others how I can be both qualified and unwanted. The explanation is not personal, it's institutional. They say they want people that are going to stop youth violence, yet I was working to stop youth violence. And yet the very chief of police that wants to stop youth violence went against the guy that was stopping youth violence. The explanation is not personal, it's institutional. The section matters because it exposes the lie at the center of the workforce shortage narrative. The problem is not that there are not enough licensed social, professionals. The problem is the system only wants professionals who are not willing to challenge it. Everyone else is expendable. No one matters, no matter how badly they're needed. That should alarm everyone. Anyone who at least relies on the system for care, justice, or protection. Because, the part of the story that people often skip past because it's uncomfortable and because it refuses to resolve neatly is survival. In this context, does not look like vindication. Does not look like reinstatement. Does not look like an apology, a cleared name followed by a phone call offering restoration. Survival looks like continuing to exist professionally inside a system that has already decided it would prefer you didn't exist. That's an important clarification that has to be made, because the narrative that gets imposed on people in this position is often intentionally incomplete. While I've been effectively unemployable within a large portion of my profession, I'm not destitute, hidden, or dependent on the institutions that try to erase me. I still get my veterans pension. I served honorably. I'm disabled. I get my pension. That income is not charity. It's not a loophole. It's the result of prior service and legally recognized obligation owed to me by the U.S. government. You guys may not like it, but I get it. That's what makes my continued independence possible. And it's likely one of the reasons this campaign has not succeeded as clearly as it was intended. If I didn't have this money, I would have been thwarted, as McCann hoped, and others. But I do have this money, and I have a mother that loves me deeply. And we have a little bit of generational wealth saved up. But that's what you're trying to steal from a disabled veteran and his elderly mother and my daughter. That distinction matters. The system was able to disrupt my ability to earn money through traditional professional channels, but it was not able to force compliance through financial desperation, which is what it hoped for. That fact alone changes the power dynamic. It helps explain the intensity of this response, because most people can't fight back. Retaliatory systems work best when silence can be purchased through economic pressure. Shut the fuck up or we take your job. That's it. When leverage fails, they shift to reputational pressure instead. Once the career kill shot is landed, the question is no longer whether the system acted fairly. The question becomes whether you can remain visible without being consumed. It's like a submarine on the surface. You can only be up there for so long. That's a different kind of fight entirely. There is a comforting myth that if you document enough, comply enough, remain ethical enough, the system will eventually correct itself. The myth survives because people want to believe institutions are self-healing. In reality, systems like Lorain County's government, they do not correct themselves. They never will. They stabilize. They absorb dissent. They normalize harm by stretching across time, across agencies, across quiet conversations, and until it no longer registers as an event, just becomes a condition. Living inside the condition, that which is Lorain. Oh, it's just Lorain, right? Requires vigilance most people never see. Every interaction becomes strategic. Every email is preserved. Every silence is noted. Every opportunity is evaluated, not just for professional value, but for exposure risk. You learn quickly that transparency is not rewarded uniformly. You learn that honesty without power is reframed as instability. And you learn that persistence is relabeled always, always, always as obsession when it comes to the wrong person. And yet, I continue. I continue because the alternative is just to despair. The system is counting on that. It's counting on my exhaustion, your exhaustion, our exhaustion. It's counting on the isolation that we all feel. You guys aren't alone. I know you feel that way. I feel that way, but we're not alone. We're all fighting the same fight. They just don't want to fucking hear it or see it or feel it. And I know you don't think I'm with you, but, for those that come at people like Amber and other people that come to me for assistance, listen, it's not about whether you support me. It's about whether I can support you. And if your cause is righteous, I am well enough to take up any righteous cause, especially one of somebody that is the underdog. I love to be the patron saint of lost causes. So when you come to me with a problem and I try to fix it, I'm going to help you. A lot of people are in my inbox for that reason. And that, unfortunately, for a lot of my haters out there, including the people that want me to see me physically beat up or make me out to be an aggressor, hate is that I will give the shirt off my back to help the people around me. And I have, and I continue to do so. And that's why you see these people out there supporting me so vehemently. Because when they ask me at their moments of worse destitution or their moments of thinking the world has failed them, you can ask them. Ask any one of my friends. If you have a crisis and you're about to fucking step off the deep end, who are you going to call? I'm not saying Ghostbusters, and I'm not saying I'm their therapist. I would recommend they always call their therapist. But in that moment, many of my friends call me. And I always talk them down off that ledge. That's why I continue, because the alternative is just to despair. I'm not gonna let quiet shame creep in when people ask why I'm not working in my field that I'm licensed to be in. Well, where do you work? Or what agency you're with? Well, I'm not with an agency because James McCann stuck his penis in my a-hole so hard that everybody thinks that I like it, and now they won't hire me because they don't like people who have sex with cops. Just kidding. Stupid joke. But it's continuing on the quiet shame that creeps in when people ask me that. And it does. Listen, does it bother me that I'm not working in my field? 1,000%. Because every job I've ever interviewed for, every place I've ever worked, I didn't give a fuck about the money. What I loved about Applewood was they did pay me semi-decently. It wasn't great. It was like $60K a year. They gave me 5 weeks vacation. And I got to work with juveniles in the juvenile court system. Here's a thought, Applewood, and well, not even Applewood. Here's a thought. Well, yeah, it would have to be Applewood. You still have to provide me a supervisor. But if you guys have a probation officer at the top running probation that's a master level clinician with an LISW, and you do an adult probation, because I know her and she's a great. And I don't want anyone to think this either. I don't hate all of our government. Like, the head of adult probation is a fucking amazing person. I like her. She is doing great things for the adult probation department. And I've also reached out to her. I think maybe it was the head of another department, maybe it was juvenile probation, but to assist me in allowing DNC radio to work with the juvenile justice kids. And they've done that. As social workers, even though I may be persona non grata, I'm still going to call the county up and try to help people out. I'm still going to try to help every agency out. I do believe the guardian ad litem agency needs somebody there that's going to do something right for it. You really want to fix GAL, have me do it. I don't have to have supervision to do that, and I can do the job quite well. But I mean, if you guys at the county level wanted to mend your ways, you could have offered me, or still could offer me, any one of the numerous jobs that I've applied for. But unfortunately, you won't. And so then I have to go back and apply to the disability of the VA and say I'm unemployable and go back on permanent disability. So instead of employing me and letting me work to help the county residents, you're going to make me go back to the Veterans Board, and they're going to say, why can't you get a job? Well, I'm permanently unemployable now that you paid for me to go back to school. Really? So we have to pay you now again? And now we have to pay you even more because they don't want you to work in a field that we trained you to go back to work in because you said you could do it, and I can, and I will, and I do. Apparently just not in Lorraine. And when they give me that, go from 80 to 100, I'm going to crank up another $2,000 a month. And then maybe I can afford to live and eat, because right now, God knows I'm not. I mean, I jokingly put this stupid, my little banner up over here all the time. But, grand scheme of things, I lost almost 3,000 plus a month in income, plus my vacation pay, on top of the money that I was already going to get in my disability pay. So imagine a world where Aaron's making close to $5,000 a month, working in juvenile justice, putting in overtime like nobody's business because he was salaried, staying there long beyond any probation officer, going to every activity, going roller skating with the kids, showing up at renounce denounce, being the only licensed professional allowed in renounce denounce, allowing himself to integrate in all these systems. But I'm the problem. Okay, I got you. What's often missed is that being blocked from employment doesn't just extinguish your professional obligation, though, right? Just because I can't get a job doesn't mean I'm still not that. I still got to fucking handle my professional obligations as a licensed social worker. I have to volunteer my time, even though I can't work, if I want to keep my license, because I have to apply it to all these other avenues. And I'll keep applying for work because it's my social obligation. But no one's coming back and offering me a job unless it's at the federal prison. I don't want to work there. Fuck that. Hold on. Well, should know I'll be outside with my socks on, because it's wet out there. Let's make sure that we're locked up. Sorry, there was a door shut outside, and my Contact Corso decided she was going to woof woof, and I trust her when she woof woofs because she's a big girl. But you know, look at that. These doors close quietly. And yeah, see, it's not me. They can deny it publicly. And that's, what they cannot do is revoke my ethical framework that governs my conduct unless I have violated. I didn't. The work continues, just not in the way that the system prefers. It continues through right here, this podcast. It continues through the investigative writing that I do. It continues through the public records litigation, documentation, and narrative accountability. It continues to refusing to lie about what happened in order to make the institutions feel better. The medium has changed, so to speak. I don't get to work with the kids anymore, but the obligation is not. It's not a miscalculation. The system assumes that once someone is isolated from their former roles, they lose their legitimacy. That assumption only holds if the legitimacy flows exclusively from institutions and the monetary gain therein. It does not. Legitimacy also can be built from consistency, accuracy, documentation, and the refusal to disappear quietly. That kind of legitimacy is harder to destroy because it doesn't rely on permission. I don't need their permission to advocate. The deeper truth about all this is the system did not and is not afraid of unqualified people. I don't give a fuck about anybody that doesn't have these stupid ass letters. People go, why do you care about those letters so much? Well, I cared about those. I could get the CDCA back anytime I want because I do have a minor in that. It doesn't require me to get a bunch of extra stuff. Apparently, I was one class off that I could have taken and completed and got my license, but TIA complained against it. Yeah, they forgave me, but they still brought it up. And I'm tired. Why would I keep paying for a license that people are going to use against me? I'm not going to pay for a license just so you guys can go try to find shit to make up to write into my board about me. I mean, imagine being so fucking penny Annie. Imagine being such a little bitch that you have to be like James McCann or little Miss Tia Hilton, and you have to call someone's board and go, oh, look at him, he got this trouble. I mean, just imagine that. Imagine that you're such a little fucking bitch that's the way you got to go. I mean, do you, boo, I guess. I mean, but in the grand scheme of things, it just feels like something maybe you shouldn't do. I'm not even going to play. I was going to play a little clip, but who cares? At this point, we're like fucking forever in. Anyway, so the system's afraid of professionals who know the rules, like me, well enough to point out when they're being violated selectively, like me, and it's afraid of the records that contradict its curated narratives. That fear explains the response far better than any allegation ever could. These fuckers are scared of me because I do exactly what scares them the most. I expose them. Survival here doesn't mean acceptance. It means adaptation without surrender. I'm not going away. It means building parallel paths when official ones are blocked. It means continuing to apply professional ethics as a social worker, even when institutions do not. It means to tell the story and truth slowly, carefully, and relentlessly, knowing that the goal is not immediate justice, but a long-term accountability level. I'm not here for the short term. I'm here for the long term. This is not a triumphant ending. It's just a long-term, drawn-out one. And it's a necessary one. Because if the story ends with silence, the system wins. Not once, but twice or more. Once by removing me, a professional, from the payroll. And again by erasing the lesson. And the lesson is the most important part. Who gives a fuck about me and my salary, right? What happened here was not an anomaly. It was a demonstration of power. It showed how reputational mechanisms can replace formal discipline. Say what you want, but what McCann did was bullshit. Read the emails, tell me otherwise. It showed how professional exile can be imposed without findings. hearings or violations. It showed why ethical actors become liabilities when they insist that ethics apply upward, not just downward. And it showed something else the system did not intend to reveal. You can block employment, you can contaminate reputation, and you can close doors quietly and deny it publicly. But you cannot take away an ethical obligation that's already internalized. You cannot untrain a professional conscience. And you cannot erase a change agent simply by removing their paycheck. That is the limit of erasure. That's exactly why this story cannot end and will not end quietly, right? Because I want you guys to understand this. I don't give a fuck about the check. It was nice. It was a difference in, in us, being able, like as I told my daughter once, well, me working and having my pension is the difference between us being able to buy food for your friends and give things away to people and not. Sometimes it requires us to cut back on a lot of things. Like, I don't know. I'm considering sending my daughter on the bus now because 15 minutes there and 15 minutes back is killing me on gas, and I don't have that kind of money anymore. And because I'm not helping the community and I'm not doing anything to help the community. I mean, imagine if I was still working with juvenile justice, I'd still be in and out of the high school, I'd still be around my daughter. This would have been an ideal system for me to be able to raise my child and then be here. And that was the plan I was setting up until James McCook fucking came along and did his dumb shit. So, like, let's translate back into this, because not everything you've heard up till now on the point of the episode leads directly here, right? What you've been listening to is a collection of isolated controversies. As Jaslyn said earlier, timelines matter. Not one bad meeting. Not a strange legal bill here or there. Not a single official making one or two questionable choices, right? We have a long documented history of basically political fornication. What you've been hearing is the lived effect of something much larger. It's exactly what I wrote about when I said what the public sees is the end of the process, not the beginning. Votes now ratify outcomes, and they've already been decided elsewhere. That's not rhetorical. That's literal. If you've ever watched a Lorain City Council meeting or a county commissioners meeting and felt like the decision was already locked in before you got to the first public comment, well, I'm sure that's Garen saying, yeah, good night. You can watch it again later. I'm almost done. I'm on the last section right now, Garen, so I'll be done in the next 25 minutes. But that feeling is not paranoia. It's pattern recognition. The decisive moments have already happened. By the time the gavel comes down, they have happened inside engagement letters, outside counsel contracts, indemnification approvals, advisory emails, and quiet legal consultations that never required a vote and never invited public awareness. And that's where the debate feels hollow. That's why so many explanations sound technically correct but substantially empty. That's why the answer to who authorized this is always someone who never appeared on the ballot. Someone who never has to explain the decision publicly. It's not accidental. As I wrote once before, this is not the result of incompetence. It's the product of structural shift of how power functions in Lorain County. So we're going to get to our last part here, which is going to be about my most recent article that I did on the county. Well, let me rephrase that. This is going to be about the most recent article that I did on laws and operating systems. So it talked about the county, the city. It talked about the multiple law directors. Again, it's a long one tonight. I know we're at the last end of 3 hours, and I'm going to do about another 15, 20 minutes. But I haven't been online in quite a few days, and these can be spread out. You can watch this over multiple views. But we're going to talk about that last argument, that last episode that even my own attorney said to me, I never really viewed it that way. And you have to look at it that way, and that all of these law departments and all of these law firms are involved in your government, and they're not voted in. Well, in some cases they are, but in other cases they're not, and they're not supposed to be acting that way if they are voting in when it comes to your law. So law is the operating system, and here's where the pivot point matters. So the people are going to get uncomfortable because it challenges how you were taught to think about government. Law is no longer functioning as a boundary about power. In Lorain County, laws become the operating system of power. And historically, lawyers advised elected officials. They warned about the risk. They treated policy into defensible language after decisions were made. The hierarchy is gone. Today, legal positioning really often determines what decisions are even allowed to exist before the public ever hears about them. And by the time an issue reaches a public meeting, the range of acceptable outcomes has already become narrowed to somewhat somewhere else. Contracts have pre-committed the city or county to other future actions, engagement letters that define the scope of inquiry beyond or before the facts are gathered. Prosecutorial discretion has already decided when matters will advance and which matters will disappear into silence. None of this is required as a referendum. Most of it will never be recorded as a vote. Yet each of these legal steps carries more practical force than any other resolution debated on a live stream. This is how governments gets privatized without being sold, right? Public money still pays for everything. Taxpayers still fund the system. What the public no longer controls is the discretion. The ballot box can no longer reach a law firm, or it can't reach a law firm. An election cannot compel a prosecutor to explain a declination. A public comment cannot undo a contract that was signed months earlier. Power has migrated into spaces that democratic tools no longer apply. And so, we get down to looking at the gatekeeper who's elected that brings us to the office who made the rest of the structure possible. We talk about Patrick Riley. Before we get into Patrick Riley and close this up, I'm going to do one last quick break because I need to. And then we're going to move.
Hey there, folks. If you really want to know what's happening in your hometown, the place to go is Lorain Daily and Vermilion Daily. From city council and school boards to local businesses, community events, and neighborhood stories, these outlets cover what the big media ignores. This is hyper-local news for real people in real communities. Visit Lorain Daily and VermilionDaily.com today. Read it, share it, support local journalism, because your community deserves coverage that actually lives here. Hey there.
All right, so Patrick Riley, my piece de resistance, he didn't enter office quietly, right? He was elected by the voters in the city of Lorain in 2009, and he assumed that office in 2010. The fact is often invoked as if it ends the discussion. It does not. It explains how the system hardened. Elections create entry points, not permanent accountability. Longevity matters. Over more than a decade, mayoral administrations have changed, councils have rotated, police chiefs came and went. The law department has remained the same. Over time, authority has shifted away from the elected law director personally and into his assistant law directors, retained outside firms, and special counsel arrangements that never faced voters. What the public continues to see was an elected official at the top. But when the public did not see was the daily exercise of power happening through intermediaries and how answered only to contracts, invoices, and internal directives protected by privilege. And this is how discretion gets recast as inevitability. Public record denials are framed not as choices, but as legal conclusions. Prosecutorial referrals become risk assessments. When citizens challenged outcomes, they were not told, well, we decided no. They were told the law does not allow it, even when it clearly does. And as I wrote, voters cannot even vote out a public records exemption. They cannot recall an engagement letter. They cannot cross-examine a billing narrative that never appears in a public debate. That's how elected offices become structurally untouchable without ever becoming formally unaccountable. And when that unaccountability becomes billable, once the legal authority was insulated from the electoral consequence, accountability didn't disappear. It was converted into managed expense. In a healthy system, accountability costs the government something, right? Investigations consume time. Transparency forces correction. Misconduct creates exposure. In Lorain, that equation kind of flipped. As I wrote, the more governance failed, the more profitable legal response became, right? Being a lawyer in Lorain has become a new sort of game. Outside counsel stopped being an exception and started being the rule, the default. Engagement letters replaced internal correction. Every failure generated an invoice. Every controversy justified a retainer. Delay became strategy because delay was billable, folks. Billable hours are the most important thing. The public really saw the full picture. Legal bills surfaced months later, or they were done in, control board hearings that no one ever pays attention to, redacted, stripped of context, approved as routine. By the time anyone asked questions, the money was already gone. The system rewarded containment over truth. Lawyers were paid to manage exposure, not resolve misconduct. The safest course of delay was delay, procedural complexity, and controlled disclosure and release. And here's the part that people miss. There's no financial incentive to fix what generates revenue, right? It's like all that shit in the traffic court. To fix what generates revenue. They didn't want to do it. So this is the only incentive to manage it. One incentive. And that's gone. They're not going to do it. So when firms never leave, and that's how you know, if you want to see how it works in practice, just you don't start with the personalities, you follow continuity. You look at Wickens, Hertz, or Panza. This firm appears repeatedly in the county and the city. These guys, like, here's the thing. I call them Wickens, Bosnia, and Herzegovina. Because when I was in the army, Bosnia and Herzegovina, I was always like Bosnia, Wickens, Bosnia, Herzegovina. Like, so I have Wickens, Herzer, or Panza. Like, it's such a long word. Bosnia, Herzegovina. Anyway, their names all over Lorraine City matters. Cross administrations and dispute types for quite some time. Multiple years, multiple issues. They cover the city council, even though that itself creates some sort of a problem when you represent the city and then you represent individual council members. It creates a problem. Over time, repetition creates that institutional memory, though. The memory doesn't appear on invoices, but it shapes strategy. Well, why wouldn't we go with them? And then we shift over to Dooley, Gambala, Pecora. Now, it's often brought in under the banner of independence, particularly when special counsel arrangements, right? But as I documented, those engagements are defined by contracts that set scope in advance, preserve privilege, and retain termination authority within the same institutions whose conduct may be implicated. Independence exists procedurally while remaining structurally bounded. What I say about that is when they charged Guerin, they brought in Patrick Ward. Patrick Ward was supposed to be independent counsel, but his contract clearly stated otherwise. The contract between the city and Dooley, Gambala, and Pecora is often overlooked because their strategy was you do our bidding. And if they were not considered independent, then they couldn't do it. So any plea that Ward got is technically illegal. Any use of them was illegal. But hey, whatever. When matters escalate into federal court, you end up with McLandridge. Now, this is a lawyer I've never heard of before, but he appears repeatedly in the Northern District filings involving Lorraine City because I checked out a lot of their claims. Different venue, same continuity. Then we get to Rosenbaum. Oh my God. This guy. Anybody that thinks I'm friendly with this guy, I don't even know this guy. I don't even care. All I know is that anybody whose own son would put a bullet in his back and then be forced in prison-wise to like push him around in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. That's like some devil God work shit there. That's like some TV like justice. But hey, whatever. I don't know. I didn't never see what happened. I don't know any of these people. I'm only making statements on vague accusations that I've heard in the public about what happened. Maybe that's not how it went down. Maybe it is. But either way, I don't care enough about the guy to want to know. All I do know is that his appearance is not background. It's targeted. His public engagement letters with the court and court filings show him being retained in at least 2 recent federal court matters involving former Chief McCann. In both these instances, the city authorized a $5,000 payment retainer to represent McCann personally, even though McCann was being sued in an individual capacity alongside the city. So understand that I'm suing McCann personally, not as police chief, because his actions were beyond that of the police chief, which means it was a 1983 violation and thereby excludes him from his actual qualified immunity. And that distinction matters. When they bring Rosenbaum in to protect Chief McCann, a retired now civilian who was not indemnified by the city, and that matters. Rosenbaum rolls in as a former longtime prosecutor in Lorain County who prosecuted some of the most consequential cases in Lorain County history, including the 94 Head Start convictions that have been overturned of Nancy Smith and Joseph Allen. Now, decades later, these prosecutions became the basis for civil rights lawsuits and litigation in which Rosenbaum himself is named as a defendant. It's not an allegation, guys. I'm not bullshitting you. That's public record. I wrote, and as I will state, the public record reflects rotation of roles, not rotation of actors. When the same attorney appears at moments of maximum exposure to narrow scope, assert privilege, and manage risk, the role becomes operational, not incidental. really, what I really meant to say, or what I did say there in the actual article, is that if he's a fixer and he's here for McCann, what has McCann done that needs to be fixed? But we get in this approval loop, the system that only works because it's funded internally. The city of Lorraine, that funding mechanism is the Board of Control, which is Bradley and Carrion. So, of course, you want a safety service director. I mean, can you imagine? So, the safety service director and the mayor can authorize up to what, like 50 grand or more payments on anything? Carte blanche, no checks, no balances, just do whatever the fuck you want kind of shit? Wow. That's a lot of power. That funding mechanism is called the Board of Control, and it's composed during the relevant period of the mayor and the safety service director. The Board of Control has direct authority to approve all contracts and authorize legal expenditures under a certain amount, like 50 grand. Beyond that, if it's over that, they have to send it to council for approval. But here, they usually do anyway, but here's a structural problem. In litigation where the city itself is a defendant, that same executive structure has approved taxpayer-funded legal defense for co-defendants. So in this case, Riley and dude both approved seven. Oh my God, so, oh my God, that's not what I wanted. $75,000. Well, yeah, but it's 5 and 5 for our initial things. But yeah, he keeps moving on, and this where this whole appearance of independence collapses, because not because of intent, but because of structure. So authorization, supervision, defense, and exposure all run through the same internal loop. Neutrality ceases to be meaningful. This is not an accusation of bad faith. It's just observable governance reality. Delay as discipline is not something that we can go on with. Once prosecutions are controlled and legally spending normalizes protection, the final stabilizer is records control. The Ohio Public Records Act is supposed to be an equalizer, and in practice, delay, fragmentation, redirection, and procedural exhaustion turns records into a test of endurance. And I'm more than willing to wait them out. As I wrote before, the most effective form of denial is not refusal, it's attrition, it's waiting. Delay disciplines behavior. If you delay, and wait till they deny, delay, wait till they die, you're good. It teaches citizens that which questions will be tolerated, and it teaches officials which communications to route through less viable channels. It teaches the system how to absorb scrutiny without conceding error. And also tells them which, like when someone like me emails, I get moved up to somebody that's going to answer precisely. Because I'll tear you up if you don't. Records once described as non-existent, suddenly they surface. Exemptions change. Explanations shift. There's never an apology. The system just simply moves on as if it never fucking happened, having taught the lesson it needed to teach to you, the citizen. The real economy in this is that the truth that people avoid is because the sound cynical is that it matches the evidence is that the system does not need to fear scrutiny. It budgets for it. It's in the budget. Government can always outspend its critics because it's spending their money. When accountability becomes billable, silence becomes an operating expense. I mean, they're using your money to buy lawyers to defend themselves against you. Imagine that. They spent my fucking tax dollars on a lawyer to defend that fucking piece of shit chief against me in a lawsuit and Garen. When we're suing him not as chief, but as James fucking McCann, the douchebag who can't follow constitutional law. Oh, and the Coast Guard. Anyway, fuck off. Fuck off, James. But you can. They can always outspend us because it's our money they're spending us with. When accountability becomes billable, the silence becomes non-operating expense because they can write it off. There's no downside to resisting us. There's only an upside to persistence. Hold out. Now, here's the question I want you sitting with when I move into my closing is that the most important decisions in Lorain County are now made through legal contracts, controlled investigations, and discretionary enforcement. Who is actually governing? And did the public ever have a meaningful opportunity to vote for him? That's my question. That's why the outrage doesn't work. That's why the system outweighs us. The countermeasure is not anger, as I wrote, it's architecture. What remains is enforcement of consequences that cannot be changed, cannot be managed away. And that brings us to our closing and why this matters and why the armor cannot stay on the back of forever of one. At some point, the question stops being what happened to me and becomes what kind of civic culture are we willing to live inside? Not just here, not just now, but as a pattern. It's either going to harden or be interrupted. Systems like this, when are described throughout this work, do not just collapse under outrage, right? They persist precisely because outrage burns hot and fades fast. What cannot survive is sustained understanding paired with personal resolve. This is why this story matters, folks. It's why a single social worker, a single complaint, a single police chief, or a single set of emails. It's not about any of those things. It's about whether people are willing to recognize that the erosion of accountability in our society does not announce itself with fucking sirens like the damn siren at the mill every day at 6 o'clock. It comes quietly and professionally and with impeccable letterhead. Impeccable. The danger of the system is not that it targets loud people like me. It's that it trains everyone else to be quiet. Teaches everyone else to shut the fuck up. Because once people understand that asking questions like Aaron can cause contracts, referrals, access, or professional standing, silence starts to look like wisdom, right? They're like, hey, shit, I ain't saying shit. Look what they did to Aaron. Compliance starts to look like maturity, right? You're immature if you don't shut the fuck up. If you talk too much. Looking away starts to feel like survival. Over time, the public internalizes the lessons that justice is just risky and convenience is safer. That's how democracy hollows out without ever formally ending. No rights were ever repealed. No laws were ever abolished. People simply just stopped fucking using them. That's why they say, rights are only rights as long as you exercise them. What I try to do here is refuse that bargain. I'm not going to bargain my soul away. Not because I enjoy the cost of it. I'd love to still be working. I'd love to still be making money. Shit. I'd love it if any social work agency would call me up and offer me a job right now. Doing what I love. That's never going to happen. Because I understand what happens when no one pays it. When institutions learn that reputational harm can be inflicted without proof and without consequence, they will use it again and again and again and again as a tool of harm. When records can be delayed into irrelevance, they will be. They'll make you wait, like me and Mary's, because there's a 1-year statutory claim on anything that is suable under the law when it comes to defamation. So the longer they hold off on giving me her emails, the longer they have to say she's not going to be liably held under defamation standards. So it's beneficial financially to them. Because I would sue her if they're bad for her statements, because I'm sure they are. I'm sure she's made criminal statements about me. Because she already has. She's made things that said me and Garen were going to harm her, come around her. You don't know that. Not only that's never happened. You're not worth that. Fuck. Big ass linebacker looking bitch. Nobody fucking wants to stalk you. Fuck, you can see her bitch ass through a fucking crowd 8 miles away. Like, please. Nobody out there is stalking you. But when discretion can be weaponized, when remaining officially neutral, it will be. These are not the moral failures of individuals alone. These are predictable outcomes in a system that rewards containment over correction. But here's the truth: it can't be outsourced or delegated. No one's coming to save a public that will not save itself. There is no permanent shepherd in civic life, folks. There's no single watchdog. And no matter how persistent, who can guard every gate forever? I can't. That expectation itself becomes a form of dependency. If people wait for one person like me to take all the hits, file all the requests, and endure all the smears, and absorb all the risk, then the system only has to isolate that one person to restore the quiet. This is not resistance. This is abdication dressed up as admiration. At some point, others out there have to start saying thank you for all you do. And they got to pick up the fucking armor, pick up the sword and the shield. Not theatrically, not angrily, not desperately, but fucking deliberately. The armor is knowledge of the law. It is documentation. It is refusing to be intimidated by silence or soothed by vague reassurances. It is the understanding that the right to question does not require permission, and that professionalism does not mean obedience. Does it mean sit when told, do what told? When people learn how mechanisms work, when they understand how their fucking government works, when they see that the same patterns repeat across case after case after case after year after year after year, when they see one law director doing the same thing another law director did, and each one of them were the trainees of the previous one before, because who else wants that job? It's not like a shit ton of lawyers are running for that position. I'm not even sure it should be an elected position. But I mean, again, we see the mayor gets to appoint the safety service director, and then they both get to sit on the same fucking thing that decides payment. That doesn't seem very fair, but hey, whatever. I can't be the shepherd dog and the dog forever, guys. No one can. I'm getting tired. I'm getting tired of being beat up in the public eye. I'm getting tired of not being listened to. I'm getting tired of jackasses out there making accusations about me, going into other people's, posts. Mr. Diaz running this fucking yap with his little smiley fucking face. Just because your little bitch ass is friends with somebody that I probably insulted sometime doesn't mean you can go around telling people that some little Oompa Loompa motherfucker in a bar that I'd only been to once said something and you automatically believe him. Here, I got this one for you. Go fuck yourself, bro. Like you literally have my name in your mouth more than I care to count, and that's all I'm gonna say. But the work was never meant to end with me, guys. It's never been meant to end with me. It's never been meant to end with Garen or with Bob or with, Mauricio. It's meant to demonstrate what resistance actually looks like when it's grounded in ethics rather than ego. It looks slow. It looks meticulous. It looks painful, costly, unglamorous, and lonely until it doesn't. Because the moment others recognize themselves in the pattern, the isolation breaks. These people become my people. These people understand what I've been fighting. And once they're fighting the same fight, you suddenly find yourself with allies. So for those out there that think they can continue to attack me, all I've been doing all along while ignoring your attacks is building allies and helping and supporting the people that feel like me, that are in the same situations as me. These people that adamantly defend me online are people that I have offered my assistance to wholeheartedly without request for any payment or reservice, because that's what humans do, and that's what fucking social workers do. They may not sound like me, but they do what I do. And we don't charge or have expectations. We know what we do is for the betterment of our society. And when that happens, and when others recognize themselves in that pattern, that isolation will break. And this story lands right where it needs to land. It will do one essential thing for you. It will remind you and the rest of the people that justice is not a service provided by the institutions that you live by. It is a condition maintained by the citizens. When that maintenance stops, when you stop exercising your rights, the structure decays no matter how many meetings are held, no matter how many lawyers are hired, and no matter when that maintenance resumes, even quietly, even imperfectly, the system has to fucking adjust. The choice is not between heroism and apathy. The choice is between participation and submission, between learning how to power actually operates and pretending it still works the way that civic books promised, between standing upright in the face of inconvenience or kneeling for the sake of discomfort. No one's required to fight every battle, but everyone's responsible for refusing to be fucking livestock. That's why this matters. You guys are fucking livestock being led to the fucking slaughter. Not because of what's been done to me, but because of what will be done to you if nothing changes. I carried the armor as long as I could, because someone had to show it could be done and worn. Now maybe you guys can start to share it a little bit. Otherwise, the silence wins. The silence has always been the most efficient supporter and enforcer of all. That's it. And with that, tonight, and the end of this extremely long podcast, I leave you. But I just want to say, silence is no longer an effective tool. Yell your truth out loud at the top of your lungs. Be Be the one, be the change you want to see. Be a change agent. And most of all, be lawful, not awful. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. I know it's been a long one, and I know it's been a while since I've been online, but I wanted to catch up and get you guys a long one before the end of the new year. Keep up the good work. Keep advocating. Do the right thing. Stand up for your truths. Stand up for your people, and be good humans. We'll talk to you guys next time.